At the start of the story, a man is leaning on his sword in the middle of a battlefield. He glances around and realizes that every single person around him is dead. Then he hears a voice speaking to him. He feels a surge of irritation when he recognizes who it is, his enemy. That enemy is a giant named Eudi, who entered the Empire 20 days ago along with 2 other giants. These giants unleashed destruction and chaos upon the world for reasons nobody understood. The man demanded to know why Eudi was still breathing after tearing the Empire apart. Eudi told him not to bother worrying, since he would be dead very shortly. The man pointed out that the other giants were waiting around for him to die. He mentioned that one of the giants had been burned alive by a red dragon, while the other had been sealed away forever by a man named Lorne. Eudi told the man not to let that go to his head, because even though those giants fell, they took down the people who defeated them, meaning there was no longer anyone powerful enough in the world to stand against them. The man insisted that he was still very much alive and full of strength. Eudi told him to stop fooling himself, saying he could feel the man's energy draining away. Eudi was pleased that the man was on the verge of death. He told him that if he had discovered his gift earlier and pushed himself harder, he would have been a serious threat to them. The man told Eudi that he already knows he wasted his life, so there was no need to spell it out. Eudi told him to take pride in what he had accomplished, saying no other human had done what he did, and that he should savor his victory while he still could, because their world would soon be swallowed by the starlight. The moment Eudi finished speaking, the man sliced off his head. After that, the man pushed himself forward as best he could, making his way toward his destination. Along the way, he thought about all his companions, soldiers, just like him. After walking for some time, he came across the bodies of his fallen friends. He wondered why they had to throw their lives away for the sake of honor. He told them they should have fled and lived their lives instead. He questioned why he alone had been capable of fighting the giants, when even the Empire's most skilled swordsmen hadn't been able to lay a scratch on them. He believed his friends would still be alive if he hadn't been pushed to the front lines to lead them. While the man was lost in his thoughts, he heard someone call out to him. He was stunned by the voice. He gathered himself and walked toward it. When he arrived, he was astonished to find that his Grand Commander was still alive. Her name was Ezen, and though she had survived, she had lost one of her arms. Ezen asked the man, whose name was Ronan, whether he had managed to kill Eudi. Ronan confirmed that he had. Ezen was overwhelmed with relief and even broke into tears. Ronan then asked her for a favor. He requested that she look after the bodies of the fallen soldiers. He asked this because in the Empire, the bodies of soldiers were typically burned or simply left behind. Ezen was taken aback by the request and asked why he couldn't handle it himself since he appeared to be fine. Ronan coughed up blood and told her that he was dying. Ezen asked what he would have done if he had made it through. Ronan told her he would have loved to attend the academy. Ezen was stunned. She asked him why he wanted to go there. Ronan explained that something Eudi said made him wonder how different things might have been had he attended earlier, but the deeper reason was that it had been his late sister's dream to send him there. Ronan felt a pang of guilt that he had never gone, but found some comfort knowing he would soon be reunited with his sister and the rest of their family. Ezen was heartbroken hearing this. She urged Ronan not to give up, saying that a search party would begin looking for them once the rain let up. Ronan told her to stop saying foolish things, because he was certain the rain wasn't going to stop anytime soon. While he was speaking, the rain suddenly ceased. Both he and Ezen were stunned. As they were trying to figure out what to do next, the ground began to tremble. When Ronan looked around to find the cause, he spotted in the sky something that resembled the giants. This being had 8 wings and a strange, unnatural body. Accompanying it were over 100 creatures that looked just like it. Ezen couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. She had assumed the war would end once the 3 giants were dealt with. She began to tremble and lose all hope. While she stood there in a daze, Ronan called out her name sharply. He told her to use her telekinesis to launch him upward so he could engage the creatures in battle. Ezen couldn't believe he was still talking about fighting in their condition. Ronan drew his sword and declared that he wasn't going to quit until he drew his last breath. Ezen was stunned to see that Ronan still hadn't surrendered. She believed in him. She rose to her feet and moved close to Ronan. She leaned toward his mouth and placed a small blue orb inside. Ronan asked what she had put there. She leaned close to his ear and whispered something to him. After she finished, she pleaded with Ronan. If they ever met again, she wanted him to tell her to become a tailor. She said she had done many things in her life, but nothing had brought her as much happiness as being a tailor. The moment she said this, the 8-winged creature unleashed a mysterious force that killed them both. When Ronan came to, he called out for Ezen, but received no answer. Looking around, he realized he had been returned to the village where he had grown up. He couldn't believe he had gone back to the past. Ronan sat down and began thinking through his situation carefully. He recalled that before Ezen placed the blue orb in his mouth, she had explained that it was a device that allows the user to travel back in time. It was this orb that had allowed Ezen, an ordinary tailor, to rise to the rank of Grand Commander. She had told Ronan the orb allows anyone to travel to the past 4 times, but she had already used it 3 times, leaving only 1 use remaining. She told Ronan that because he had the strength to fight the giants, he stood a far better chance of stopping their attack and saving humanity. She instructed him that when he returned to the past, he needed to sharpen his abilities. She asked him to enroll in Phil Leon Academy, which was renowned for producing exceptional individuals. Ronan still wasn't sure whether he was dreaming. He started shouting and punching a tree. He questioned how he could possibly change the future all on his own. But while pounding on the tree, it hit him. If he was in the past, then his sister was still alive. He grabbed a stick and sprinted home. While running through the town, he came across a group of boys bullying another boy. What confused him was how the bullies were managing to hold the boy upside down against a tree without physically touching him. He figured out that the boy was being suspended by magic. This shocked him, because anyone capable of using magic was almost never seen on the battlefield, and yet here was someone like that in a simple village. In that moment, he realized that a particular mage he once knew must have been here in the past as well. The one using the magic seemed uncomfortable with what he was doing. The bullied boy told the bully he had no money. He explained that what little he had was meant for his mother's medicine. The bully declared he had no interest in the boy's mother and started slapping him, demanding more money. He then instructed the mage, whose name was Assel, to lift the boy to the top of the tree. Assel refused, saying that if he lost control, the boy could fall and die. The bully threatened to put Assel in the tree instead if he didn't obey. Assel was terrified. He didn't understand why this was happening to him. He had learned magic to show people he was also capable of something. He was frozen with fear and didn't know what to do. As he was trying to think, Ronan struck him with his wooden stick. The moment Ronan hit him, Assel lost his focus and the boy dropped to the ground. Ronan told him to stop before he accidentally killed the kid. The bully was furious that Assel had quit. He turned on Assel and demanded to know why he would disrespect him like that. Assel was about to answer, but Ronan cut in and asked Assel where he had learned telekinesis magic. Assel told him he had learned it from a grimoire he bought from a traveling merchant. Ronan was surprised. He couldn't believe Assel was already quite skilled despite learning from a cheap beginner's book. The bully grew enraged at being ignored. He pulled out a sword and charged at Ronan. Ronan was puzzled about how a kid like that even had a real sword. He was also unimpressed by the bully's poor stance. He sidestepped the attack with ease. This didn't surprise Ronan much. Even though he had returned to the past, the battle instincts forged in him as a soldier had stayed with him. The bully told Ronan he was lucky to dodge and ordered him to get on his knees and beg or he'd kill him. He also mentioned he would go after Ronan's sister. Ronan went rigid the moment his sister was brought up. The bully said he had always fantasized about his sister. When Ronan heard that, he used his wooden stick to slice off the bully's ear. The boy screamed in agony. Ronan stepped up to him and warned him never to say his sister's name again unless he wanted worse. The other bullies couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Ronan was using the same kind of wooden stick they carried, and yet he had severed someone's ear with it. Ronan told them to return the money they had stolen from the bullied boy and to throw an extra for putting him in a bad mood. After collecting it, he handed it all to the boy. The boy pointed out that it was more than what had been taken. Ronan told him all he wanted was the sword, and the boy could keep the money. While the boy was thanking Ronan, Assel collected himself and apologized to the victim. He explained that he had been too frightened of the bully to resist. The boy told Assel not to apologize. He understood he had been under threat. After the boy left, Ronan was glad to see that Assel wasn't actually a bully at heart. He told Assel that he had something he wanted to do with him, and that Assel should meet him in 4 days. He warned Assel not to run, or he would track him down and beat him. After saying that, Ronan ran home. When he arrived, he picked some flowers for his sister since she adored them. He second-guessed himself and was about to throw them away, thinking it seemed a bit silly, but just then he heard his sister step outside. When Ronan was a soldier, he had spent a long time imagining what he would say to her if they ever met again. He wondered if he should apologize for leaving, or whether he should just tell her he had missed her. When he finally saw her, all he could do was smile. Inside the house, his older sister Irel was admiring the flowers he had brought. She prepared a big meal to show her gratitude. After eating, Ronan asked how old she was. Irol said she was 22. Ronan was relieved to hear it. If she was 22, that meant he had 10 years to get ready before the mysterious creatures arrived. Irol was taken aback that he had asked her age. She pressed her hand to his forehead to check if he had a fever. Ronan felt warmth at having such a caring sister and resolved to do whatever it took to protect her. He told her he wanted to enroll in an academy. Irol lit up. She asked if he was serious, because she had always hoped he would, but he had always turned her down. When he confirmed he meant it, she searched the house and came back carrying a massive pot. When Ronan looked inside, it was packed with money. He asked her why she had so much saved up. She explained she had been setting aside money in secret, hoping to one day afford to send him to an academy. Ronan thanked her and told her the amount still wouldn't be enough for the particular academy he had in mind. Irol asked which one. He said he wanted to attend Phil Leon Academy. Irol let out a shriek of disbelief. Phil Leon Academy was the Empire's most prestigious educational institution. It had the finest professors on the continent and received funding from the imperial family itself. It was prestigious enough to be called the Factory of Heroes. It had produced celebrated figures such as Grand Commander Ezen, Swordmaster Shalon, and the Winter Witch. Getting in was extraordinarily difficult, and even Irol wasn't sure Ronan was qualified. After walking for a time, Ronan reached his destination, only to find that Assel had actually shown up. Ronan told him he wanted to test something important and instructed Assel to lift him into the air using his telekinesis. Assel was baffled by the request and said it sounded dangerous. Ronan told him not to worry and just do it. Assel raised him up, and Ronan was impressed by how high Assel could take him. While Assel's power wasn't as strong as the magic that had been used on Ronan during the fight with Audi, Ronan understood that telekinesis was crucial. It was what had allowed him to fight Audi on even footing. He also knew that telekinesis was an exceptionally rare type of magic that most mages didn't possess, which made Assel the most valuable asset in his plan to fight the giants. After holding Ronan aloft for a while, Assel began losing his grip. Ronan told him to hold on just a moment longer because he wanted to test something. He drew his sword and swung it through the air, and the moment he did, he dropped straight to the ground. Assel was confused. He hadn't lost control, and yet Ronan had fallen. He was amazed to realize Ronan had severed his magical energy, his mana. Assel asked how he had done it. Ronan flicked him on the head and told him not to ask. Even back when he was a soldier, Ronan hadn't fully understood how he could do certain things. He intended to figure it out better this time around. After putting his sword away, Ronan handed Assel his bag and told him to follow, because he was about to do something that would belong in the opening chapter of his own story, which he called the Empire's history book. On the way, Ronan told Assel he would be joining him at Phil Leon Academy. Assel was taken aback. He knew Ronan was a prodigy in martial arts, but he didn't see himself as someone with the talent to get into Phil Leon Academy. Ronan asked him if he really wanted to waste his gifts in this village and called him a coward and a failure, telling him he'd regret throwing away his time here. Ronan knew exactly what that felt like. He had done the same in his previous life as a soldier. Assel was moved by Ronan's words. He believed Ronan genuinely cared about him. He told Ronan he would go to Phil Leon Academy. Ronan congratulated him and told him there was one obstacle to clear first to prove himself. When Ronan and Assel arrived at their destination, Assel was alarmed to find that the first obstacle was defeating a lunar goblin. Ronan told him it was a task that suited him perfectly. Assel came to the conclusion that Ronan was out of his mind. A lunar goblin is a variety of goblin that frequents the area. Most people distinguish them from ordinary goblins by their yellow skin and deformed bodies, though their defining trait is their obsession with gold and other valuables. They gather everything they've stolen and celebrate on the night of a full moon. Ronan told Assel the reason he had brought them there on this particular night was to steal the goblin's hoard. Assel was shocked that Ronan already knew about the goblin's treasure festival. Ronan claimed he had read it in a book, which was a lie. He had actually learned it in his previous life. He then explained to Assel what they needed. To get into Phil Leon Academy, two things were required. First, money. The tuition fees were outrageous. Second, real-world experience. While money mattered, hands-on experience gained through actual risk was even more essential. Phil Leon Academy was packed with aristocrats who had received elite training since birth, and the only realistic way to compete with people like that was to go out and earn experience by putting your life on the line. That's exactly why the lunar goblins were perfect. They would provide both money and experience in one go. Assel was deflated because what Ronan said actually made sense. He steadied himself and began using his telekinesis to lift the treasure from the goblins. He was careful and precise. Once Ronan had filled the bags, he thanked Assel for pulling it off. Truthfully, He hadn't been completely confident Asel could manage it, so he was pleasantly surprised when it went without a hitch. Ronan was quietly pleased that he had found such a useful companion. Just as Ronan was packing up, two men came running by, screaming and chasing after a bird. Unfortunately, the noise woke one of the goblins. It looked around and discovered the treasure was gone. It immediately roused the rest and told them what had happened. As Ronan and Asel prepared to bolt, the goblin spotted them. The whole group came rushing at them. Asel collapsed to his knees in fright and asked if they should just leave the treasure and run. Ronan told them to keep hold of it. They needed it for tuition. As the goblins closed in, Ronan drew his sword and took stock of it, its weight and how much punishment it could take. He calculated that with the quality of the blade he had, he could only swing it 15 times before it gave out. That was a problem since there were 30 goblins, but Ronan figured 15 strikes would be enough. With his first swing, he took the heads off 3 goblins at once. Asel stared in disbelief. Ronan had killed 3 in a single blow, and then moved through the rest at such incredible speed that he seemed to vanish. After dealing with the goblins, he told Asel to get up so they could head home. On the way back, Ronan felt a soreness in his shoulders. He couldn't believe that slicing through some goblins had left his muscles aching. He reasoned it was probably because his body was still developing. He decided he would need to do a lot of physical training when he got home. Asel asked Ronan if he had any idea who had made the loud noise that woke the goblins. Ronan said he didn't know, but that if he ever found out, he'd make them pay for it. While Ronan and Asel were on their way back, someone fired an arrow at Asel. Luckily for Asel, Ronan caught it midair. Asel was stunned. He tried to figure out where it had come from. While the two were talking about it, the pair of men who had been screaming at the bird and shot at Asel approached them. They apologized and asked what children like them were doing out there at that hour. Ronan was infuriated by being called a child. The men spotted the treasure in Ronan's bag and were thrilled by the sight. They apologized again. Ronan told them to drop the fake apologies and asked who they were. One of the men pulled out a knife and lunged at Ronan. He announced their group was called Calboro. When Ronan heard that name, he disarmed the man and drove the knife into him. The other man rushed to intervene, but was stopped by Asel, who used a skill called Invisible Hand to pin him down. Ronan thanked Asel and then used the man's knife to finish him off. Asel was horrified and asked Ronan if he had just killed the man. Ronan said he would kill anyone who tried to kill him first, and that these men had deserved it. The group they belonged to was responsible for countless crimes, including poaching, kidnapping, and human trafficking. They were known as the Empire's most notorious poaching organization. He told Asel the men would have stolen their treasure and harvested their organs. While they were cleaning up, Ronan and Asel noticed one of the men's bags moving. When they opened it, a bird flew out. Ronan was startled by the sight. It had blue feathers. When he looked at the bird's legs, he noticed a chain. This was a device used by Calboro to disrupt a captive's mana and restrain their movement. Ronan was surprised by this, since that kind of equipment was typically only used for capturing mystical beasts. While he was thinking it over, Ronan noticed a magic circle on the bird's back and heard it speak. Asel was astonished. He assumed the bird could actually talk. Ronan explained that someone was communicating through it using communication magic. Ronan was also surprised the communication magic had activated the instant the bird left the bag, meaning the person on the other end had been trying to connect for some time, but the bag had been blocking the signal. The person speaking identified himself as Vaughn, a professor who studied mystical beasts. He said he was the guardian of the bird, whose name was Mars. Vaughn explained that he had been unable to reach Mars for some time and had been about to report the situation to the authorities. He asked Ronan and Asel who they were. Ronan said they were upstanding passers-by and that they had rescued Mars from poachers. Vaughn could hardly believe Mars had been kidnapped. He thanked Ronan for saving his bird and asked how he could repay them. Asel told Vaughn not to worry about repayment and asked how Mars would be able to find his way back home, since the chain had clearly worn him out. Ronan asked Vaughn whether Mars would fly normally once the chain was removed. Vaughn said he would. After hearing that, Ronan shattered the chain in a single strike and told Mars to go home. When Mars heard this, he looked at Ronan like a shining savior, then shoved his rear end in Ronan's face. Vaughn told Ronan that Mars wanted to see him again, and because of that he wanted Ronan to pluck one of his feathers. He explained that a dream bird like Mars could use one of its feathers as a compass pointing toward its owner. He told Ronan he would repay him when they met at his institution. After that, Mars flew away. When Mars was gone, Ronan noticed something on his hand. A few days later, Ronan brought the treasures he had gathered to a merchant named Down Caribal. Down ran the Caribal merchantry, and he was delighted to meet a customer like Ronan who had brought so many valuable goods. Ronan was equally pleased to meet an honest merchant. While the others had tried to cheat him, Down was straightforward. Ronan asked Down if he could appraise an unusual-looking egg. He explained that his first thought had been that it was animal droppings. Furious at the idea, he had thrown it at a boulder, and the egg had completely obliterated the rock. That was why he wanted to know what kind of egg it was. After inspecting it closely, Down wondered if it might be horse dung. Ronan snatched it back and decided he'd hold on to it for the time being. He then asked Down if he carried any books about Phil Leon Academy, explaining that he and Assel were applying and needed materials to study. Down was thrilled to hear this. His own daughter was also applying. He introduced her as Maria. Ronan was surprised when he saw her. Down told Maria that Ronan and Assel were important clients he had just finished a deal with. Maria found it hard to believe that kids like them had just closed a deal with her father. Down apologized on Maria's behalf for her comment. Ronan stepped up to Maria and asked if her middle name was Sun. She confirmed it was. Ronan was taken aback. He couldn't believe she resembled so closely someone he had known in a previous life, though the Maria he remembered had been a man. He leaned toward her ear and asked whether she had male anatomy. Maria was scandalized that he would ask such a thing and slapped him hard across the face. The force of that slap told Ronan everything. Only the Maria from his past life hit like that. Back then, he had served as a disciplinary soldier at a place called Enrollment. The Maria he'd known there was in charge of supplies. She had been easygoing and got along with everyone. But whenever soldiers made crude comments about male anatomy, she would fly into a rage and slap anyone nearby. Ronan had always been curious about why she reacted so strongly, but never had the chance to ask before she died. Now he understood. She was a woman. Maria assumed Ronan was laughing at her and wound up to hit him again. Ronan blocked it and tapped her on the head, telling her not to hit him twice since he had only deserved one slap for the stupid question. Maria was annoyed and head-butted his chin in return. Ronan and Maria immediately fell into a brawl. Once they settled down, they began talking like old friends. Assel looked on in disbelief, convinced they were both insane. Maria brought out a sword called the Black Iron Sword. She told Ronan it was an exceptional blade that even knights were eager to buy. Ronan told her he fought in a brutal style and needed something that wouldn't snap. Maria assured him the Black Iron Sword was ideal for him. Ronan was glad to receive it. It was the same sword he had carried in his past life. After handing Ronan his weapon, she asked Assel what kind of magic he used. When he told her telekinesis, Maria was shocked and told him that if he performed well in his exam, he could qualify for a scholarship. Assel was overjoyed. Maria decided she didn't need to stress about Assel anymore and turned her attention to Ronan. She asked what technique he planned to show the judges on exam day. She told him that to get into Phil Leon Academy, he needed to dazzle the panel with an extraordinary technique. The school also had a written exam which was challenging, but not nearly as critical as the practical one. The practical exam was so important that even a poor score on the written portion could be overcome if the practical performance was exceptional. Ronan asked Maria what sort of technique he needed to present. She told him that most nobles showcased their family's secret techniques, while regular martial arts applicants typically demonstrated their own personal mana-based combat techniques. Ronan was surprised to hear this. He asked whether it was even possible for martial artists to channel mana without being mages. Maria was floored by the question. She told him that everyone applying to Phil Leon Academy would need to be able to sense their own mana and use it in battle. She had assumed that was common knowledge. She couldn't believe that someone like Ronan didn't know this. Ronan asked her whether mana sensing was similar to aura sensing. Maria was even more stunned. She couldn't believe he was trying to get into Phil Leon Academy. Ronan told her not to worry and that it might just be something he already understood under a different name. Maria stood up and asked him to come outside. She picked up two short swords that belonged to Ronan. Ronan told her to leave them alone and asked what she would do if she damaged them. Maria told him she'd pay him triple the value and told him to get up quickly. She wanted to give him some hands-on training. Mana is the energy at the root of all natural power. It exists everywhere in the world, but not everyone can access it. To do so, one must sense and connect with their own inner energy through mana sense. Reaching that stage requires extensive training and deep self-understanding. For the average person, it typically takes a year just to develop mana sense. Once that is achieved, they practice their mana techniques, refine them, and then apply to Phil Leon Academy. Maria told Ronan that the fact he couldn't tell the difference between aura and mana proved he wasn't yet ready. She explained that aura was actually a form of mana, and that even highly talented mana users typically train for at least a decade before achieving aura. Ronan recalled encountering people who wielded aura on the battlefield. They always bragged about it and demonstrated unusual power, but to him it hadn't meant much, since most of them ended up dead anyway. Maria announced she was done explaining and drew her sword, rushing at Ronin. He blocked the strike, surprised by the force behind it. He was genuinely impressed by her skill and her ability to fight him effectively using two blades, and he could sense she was channeling mana, even if he couldn't see it directly. Maria had originally planned to put Ronin down in a single exchange to demonstrate the power of mana and convince him to withdraw from the exam on his own. She didn't want him to be humiliated at the academy, but to her astonishment, Ronin was far stronger than she had expected. She couldn't wrap her head around how someone who didn't even use mana could fight on this level. While Maria was distracted by her own thoughts, Ronin used his sword to push her back. He shifted into a lethal stance and told her to get out of the way of his next attack. Fortunately, she listened and jumped aside. After dodging, she told Ronin he wasn't a normal person. Ronin told her that she was quite good too, very gifted with her blades, but still a little unsteady when it came to finding her center of balance. He told her that fixing that one flaw would make her dramatically better. After saying that, he sheathed his sword and turned away. Maria snapped at him that the fight wasn't finished. Ronin reminded her that she had promised to pay him triple. The moment he said that, Maria's dual blade shattered. Maria stared in shock. Asel told her not to feel too bad about it, as if she ever had a chance against Ronin, then walked off with Ronin. Maria stood there, utterly baffled. She was convinced that Ronin was not entirely human. The next day, Maria brought Ronin and Asel a pile of books and study materials. She told them these were summaries she had personally compiled. Ronin asked what they were for. Maria was stunned and told him the exam was in 1 month and they needed to prepare. Ronin looked at the stack of books and pulled out his sword, asking if she was trying to rip them off. Maria said she had grown fond of them and wanted them all to enter Phil Leon Academy together, and the books were free. The moment Ronin heard they were free, he put the sword away. She also said she wished she could teach them herself, but her group had to move on to another location. She told them to study hard and work their best so she could see them at the academy. Ronin told her to focus on herself. As she stepped into the carriage, she told them she'd see them on exam day and not to lose her books. After Maria left, Ronin noticed his body was still sore from the spar. He understood that it was urgent he rebuild his weakened body. He found it amusing that on top of everything else, he also had to study and work just to get into an academy. It was a strange situation, but he didn't dislike it. After Ronin returned home, he began a new way of living. He ate heavily and hunted monsters continuously to acclimatize to his body and build up his endurance. He eventually wiped out every monster in the village. At night, he pushed himself to study, something he had never imagined doing in his previous life. He kept up this routine for a full month until the day of the exam finally arrived. When Asel laid eyes on Phil Leon Academy, he couldn't fathom that such a place existed. It was like a small city unto itself. Ronin told him to stop gawking because he looked like someone fresh off a farm. Asel was about to apologize when he noticed something about Ronin and pointed out that his body had filled out considerably in just a month. Ronin told him to stop paying attention to pointless things and focus on getting inside for the test. While walking, Ronin thought about someone significant who would also be participating in the exam, the Sword Saint Shallan, the most powerful warrior in the Empire. He was representing the celebrated swordsmanship clan known as Grania. Since Shallan was the same age as Ronin, he would almost certainly be taking the test at the same time. While Ronin was thinking, Asel asked whether he still had the feather from the dream bird. Ronin took it out and noticed it was pointing toward a tall building inside Phil Leon Academy. At the top of that building, Von Fozier, the Academy's zoology professor, was reorganizing his office to prepare to receive Ronin. Von was a lion-type beast man. To let in some fresh air, he opened the window, and the instant he did, he was met with Ronin's unsettling face staring back at him. Both he and Mars screamed in fright. Von demanded to know how Ronin had gotten to his window. His office was at the top of the building. He asked whether they had come after Mars. Ronin held up the feather. Von recognized it immediately and realized these were the people who had saved Mars. He apologized for screaming. Ronin told him not to worry and said it was Asel's fault they had used the window. Asel protested, explaining that the real reason was because Ronin had said he was too tired to climb the stairs and ordered Asel to float him up. Ronin clamped Asel's mouth shut to silence him. He told Von he was surprised to find that he was a wolf-type beast man and a professor at Phil Leon Academy. Von said he was equally surprised that Ronin and Asel were applicants. He felt bad that he hadn't known earlier, since he could have written a recommendation letter allowing them to skip the exam entirely. Ronan told him not to bother and brought out the egg that Mars had laid. Vaughn was visibly startled. Ronan asked why a bird laying an egg would shock him that much. Vaughn explained that a dream bird's egg is nothing like an ordinary one, and he didn't know what would hatch from it. Ronan was taken aback. Vaughn told him that a dream bird absorbs unique mana from whatever environment it inhabits, and that determines what hatches from the egg. In a lava-filled environment, a phoenix would emerge. In a monster's den, the hatched creature would resemble the monsters there. And in certain unusual conditions, the dream bird's offspring might not even take the shape of a bird at all. Vaughn said that by analyzing Mars's mana, he could form a guess, but he genuinely couldn't say for certain at this point. Ronan was frustrated. He couldn't believe an egg could be so complicated. He wondered what kind of place Mars had been in for something like this to happen. Vaughn told Ronan he wanted him to take care of the egg. Ronan asked if that was really okay, given how precious it was. Vaughn said that a dream bird only lays an egg once in its entire lifetime. The fact that Mars laid it in Ronan's presence meant the bird felt something extraordinary in him. Ronan accepted the responsibility, since he was equally curious about what was inside. He and Asel moved to leave since their exam was about to begin. Vaughn called them back and handed Ronan a map, explaining it would help him hatch the egg. After receiving the map, Ronan and Asel headed off for the test. At Galleon Castle, where the examination was taking place, all the martial arts applicants gathered in one area. An attendant emerged and called for applicant number 112. Ronan realized he was next. He had grown tired of waiting. Maria, who was seated beside him, told him all exams work this way. He asked her what she was all dressed up for. Maria told him that Phil Leon Academy was an institution attended by nobles, and she wanted to make a good impression in case any of them became future customers. While Ronan and Maria were talking, applicant 112 came back out, and applicant 113, Ronan, was called in. Maria urged him not to be nervous and to do his best. Ronan told her not to worry. When Ronan walked in, he was immediately struck by the overwhelming presence emanating from the professors. Each one was remarkable, but the one who stood out most was the elderly man seated in the center, the Academy's headmaster and archmage. His name was Krava Krer. Ronan was also struck by the energy radiating off the swordsmanship instructor, a woman named Nabir Rose, known as the Grand Sword Saint. After Ronan introduced himself, he was asked to fight a magically constructed dummy and to announce what technique he intended to demonstrate. Ronan told them he was simply going to perform a fast cut. The professors were appalled. The dummy had enough defensive capability to withstand an aura user and came equipped with rapid regeneration. They thought Ronan was being ridiculous. Even Shalon had barely managed to scratch it. Krava was quietly troubled by how openly rude the professors were being toward Ronan in his presence. But he chose to say nothing, because when he looked at Ronan, he was stunned. He couldn't believe a young person could carry such raw vitality. The moment Ronan unsheathed his sword, he executed the slash. Nabir Rose went very still. After the attack, Ronan sheathed his sword. The professors laughed. They couldn't believe he had only shown them one cut. One of them asked Krava how he wanted to score Ronan, but Krava wasn't listening. He was still staring at what Ronan had done. While Krava was studying the aftermath, Nabir Rose drew her own sword and came at Ronan. She asked where he had learned his swordsmanship. Ronan said he wasn't able to answer that. She changed her approach and instead asked whether he could see how she had just attacked him. Ronan described it precisely. She had unsheathed at an extraordinary speed and thrown 3 slashes despite the distance between them. Nabir Rose said she had used 3 slashes to make a point. Ronan's single cut had been arrogant. She had noticed he deliberately slowed the attack so the professors could observe it, and she took that as an insult to the panel. The other professors hadn't even been able to tell whether the attack had been slowed. They were completely baffled. Ronan was caught off guard by what Nabir Rose said. The only reason he had slowed the cut was because he wasn't sure his sword could survive the full force. He wasn't certain how to explain himself, especially given how worked up Nabir Rose seemed. After composing herself, Nabir Rose sheathed her sword and told Ronan that she would personally be the one to teach him. Krava was stunned that Nabir Rose had already taken Ronan on as a student. He thanked Ronan for his demonstration and asked why he had chosen their academy. Ronan thought back on his past and told Krava that he didn't want to live with regrets. Krava was deeply moved by the answer. He asked Ronan to step out. After Ronan left, Krava announced he also wanted to teach Ronan. One of the professors was baffled and asked what was so remarkable about Ronan. Krava said simply that Ronan had talent. At that very moment, the magically constructed dummy, which was supposed to have near-instant regeneration, lost its head. The 2 professors who had mocked Ronan could only stare in stunned silence. After leaving the room, Ronan Ronan wondered privately whether he could have held his own against neighbor Rose in his past life. He knew he had a lot of ground to make up to reach her level. He was glad he had come to Phil Leon Academy. There was so much to learn here. Once the practical exam was over, the applicants moved on to the written theory exam. Ronan had been studying for a month, so he had expected it to be manageable. It was not. When Ronan came out of the exam hall, he was visibly shaking. Maria was startled to hear that Ronan hadn't managed to answer even half of the questions, especially since she had given him books to prepare. Asura quietly let Maria know that Ronan had never opened the books or touched the materials. Maria told Ronan not to panic, saying she was confident he had done well enough in the practical to still be accepted. Just then, a glowing blue tablet materialized in the middle of the gathering area. Students crowded around it because it displayed their results. Asura placed first in the theory exam and 12th in the practical for the magic department. Maria placed 9th in both the theory and practical for the martial arts department. Both Asura and Maria erupted in celebration. While they were cheering, Maria asked Ronan what his results showed. Ronan told her his name wasn't on the tablet. Maria told him to stop joking. Just as Ronan was beginning to despair, an explosion went off nearby. When everyone looked for the cause, it turned out to be a glore phoenix, a bird that traditionally appeared to herald the salutatorian of each department. The phoenix launched a fireball at Ronan. When the fireball reached him, it revealed his results: first place in the practical exam and 5,712th place in the theory exam. By those combined scores, he was the salutatorian of the martial arts department. Asura and Maria erupted in joy. Ronan was elated as well. Maria couldn't believe he had ended up as salutatorian despite his disastrous theory score. While they celebrated, Ronan suddenly realized what first place in the practical exam meant. He had taken it from someone who had fully expected to claim it. He looked back. A boy was walking toward him, visibly unable to accept that Ronan had taken first place in the practical. Without Ronan's presence, that boy would have been first. That boy was Shalon. Ronan was surprised to see him. Maria assumed Shalon wanted to have a civil conversation, but Ronan knew better. In Ronan's past life, Shalon was someone who couldn't tolerate the idea of anyone surpassing him in swordsmanship. Ronan needed to keep him at arm's length. He told Shalon he was also surprised to have gotten first. Shalon didn't buy it. He asked Ronan why he was lying. Ronan insisted he was telling the truth and challenged Shalon to prove otherwise, then told him to leave him be. Shalon knew Ronan had a point, so instead, he attacked Ronan to get his proof. Ronan blocked the strike. Asura and Maria were stunned. Shalon told Ronan that if he hadn't truly earned first place, he wouldn't have been able to block that. He told Ronan to show him his real abilities. He wanted to see what had earned him second place in the practical. Ronan was annoyed. He decided to stop holding back and attacked Shalon seriously, producing 3 slashes in a single movement. Shalon blocked it, but after he did, his hand began to tremble. He admitted he understood now why Ronan had received such a high score, but he didn't think the technique alone was enough to beat him. He attacked again, telling Ronan to show him everything. Ronan was thoroughly irritated. He couldn't believe someone could be this single-minded about swords. Shalon continued to attack at a relentless pace, and Ronan was strong enough to block every strike. As the fight escalated, Ronan grew concerned. He knew things could spiral badly. He was afraid Shalon would start using his aura, which Ronan had witnessed in his past life. It was an extraordinarily powerful technique known as the Tempest Sword. Realizing the danger, Ronan abruptly stopped fighting and sprinted away. Shalon was dumbfounded. He shouted that you should never turn your back on an opponent in a fight and broke into a chase. He was about to strike Ronan from behind, but Ronan pulled Asura in front of him as a shield. Shalon was taken aback. He told Ronan it was cowardly to hide behind a woman. Asura told Shalon he was actually a man. Ronan knew Shalon would never strike a defenseless woman. He was too much of a gentleman. While sheltered behind Asura, Ronan swung his sword and cracked Shalon across the nose. Shalon reeled in pain. Ronan told Maria and Asura to run, and they were already far away before Shalon could react. Shortly after they fled, an academy instructor came to see why students had gathered. The instructor was surprised to find Shalon leaning on his sword, bleeding from the nose. He referred to Shalon as Sir and asked for the names of the students who had hurt him. Shalon told the instructor to drop the formal title. He was a regular applicant and should be treated like one. He also told him not to worry, because the fight had been a fair match. When Shalon stood up and steadied himself, he noticed his sword had cracked. He was baffled, since his blade was forged from mithril, the strongest iron in existence. He couldn't understand it. Nothing Ronan had shown him seemed like it should have been able to do that. He made up his mind to remember Ronan. The following day, Ronan and Asura ventured out out to Shimo Forest at the outskirts of the capital. Asel asked Ronan whether they should really be exploring the forest right now and brought up that Shallan came from a ducal family, the second most powerful house in the empire after the imperial family itself. He warned Ronan to be careful in case Shallan decided to retaliate. Ronan told Asel that while Shallan was obsessive when it came to swords, he was genuinely a good person. In Ronan's past life, Shallan had been regarded as everyone's ideal, a noble protector of the weak. Ronan knew him as the model noble. He told Asel that if Shallan had wanted to punish them, they would already be behind bars, which was exactly why he had told people it was a fair match. After searching the area for a while, Ronan and Asel discovered the location Vaughn had marked on the map, Fernando Spring, which sat atop a mana vein. Mana that drifts through the world will sometimes converge for unknown reasons, pooling in one place and forming what is known as a mana vein. The surrounding matter naturally absorbs this concentrated mana. An ordinary rock might transform into the highest grade mana stone, and a common plant could become a miraculous herb. Ronan knew the value of a mana vein was immense. Most people would want to seize it entirely for themselves, yet Vaughn had given them access freely just to hatch the egg. Ronan asked Asel whether the place felt unusual to him. Asel said he had never experienced so much mana in one spot. He could feel that his spells would be far more powerful here. While examining the mana vein, Asel pointed out that the egg was absorbing mana at a rapid rate. He asked Ronan whether anything felt off. Ronan asked what he meant. Asel reminded him that Vaughn had said this kind of location would attract an abundance of rare and mystical creatures. Even ordinary animals would be drawn to nest here. He asked Ronan whether he could hear any animals at all. Ronan realized the problem. He stood up and told Asel to get ready for a fight. He could smell blood. Asel asked what that meant. Ronan explained that it meant someone had been there before them and had already detected their presence. The moment he said it, a group of men wearing animal-shaped masks on the far side of the forest opened fire on Ronan and Asel with arrows. Ronan swatted them aside effortlessly. When he looked at the arrowheads, he felt a flash of recognition. He had seen them before in his previous life. Back then, at the Punitive Force camp, one of his soldiers had been showing off an arrow and explaining how it could punch through the skulls of powerful creatures like orcs. The soldier had asked Ronan, their captain, if he wanted one. Ronan had told him to stop bragging because he'd been caught using the arrows to poach animals. The soldier had told him the arrows were special, reserved for the hunting dogs of anyone who had successfully carried out over 100 poaches within the Kalboro organization. Ronan was furious to realize the people shooting at them were hunting dogs working for Kalboro. He told Asel to hide and said he had things to deal with, then charged toward the attackers. The Kalboro hunting dogs couldn't believe it. Ronan had cut down every single one of their mana-infused arrows with one sword. When they saw him running at them, one of the hunting dogs shouted for the rest to scatter and surround him. Ronan was surprised that this one was capable of thinking clearly under pressure. He knew this individual was different from the Kalboro men he had encountered in the forest. He needed a plan to catch all of them at once. Just as they were about to split apart, Ronan stopped them cold by claiming to be an ally. He told them he was the youngest hunting dog from the Dias branch and gave his name as Audi. The hunting dogs halted and converged around him. One who wasn't wearing a mask told Ronan he didn't believe him. It didn't make sense for someone so young to be among their ranks. Ronan told him to ask the branch wolf if he had doubts and pointed out that just because he himself lacked talent didn't mean others did too. The hunting dog grabbed Ronan's shirt and threatened to cut him apart. Ronan told him that people like him always came to bad ends. One of the other hunters stepped in and told the man to stand down. Ronan seemed to know their organization's rankings and branch structure, so it would be better to wait for their boss to confirm whether Ronan was genuine. No sooner had the hunting dog said that than their boss emerged from the trees. His name was Byam, and he was the wolf of the Demire branch. When the aggressive hunting dog saw his boss, he released Ronan and went to explain the situation. Ronan was glad to see Byam. If the boss was present, it meant all the hunting dogs in the area were gathered in one place. Byam told Ronan he didn't know what he was doing on their branch's territory. Ronan told him he didn't care and added that his name was certainly not Audi. When Byam heard that, he went rigid. Immediately after, Ronan drew his sword and cut down every surrounding hunting dog in a single sweep. He rushed at Byam and told him the name he had used felt perfectly suited for a poacher. After saying that, he took off Byam's head. Ronin then turned back to the unmasked hunting dog and reminded him that people like him always came to bad ends. The man's fingers fell to the ground. He screamed in agony. Ronin told him to stop overreacting and handed him the map Vaughn had given them. He told the man that if he didn't want more pain, he should use the back of the map to write down the locations of all of Kalboro's branches. The man panicked. Ronin, assuming the man was refusing, moved to finish him. The man cried out that he would do it and begged for a pen. Ronin told him to use his bleeding fingers to write. After the man finished, Ronin looked it over and thanked him. The man said he would be leaving, since Ronin had promised to let him go once he was done. The moment Ronin tucked the map away, he told the man he was not letting him go and killed him. Assel retched at the sight of the dead animals scattered around. Ronin told him to stop being dramatic. Assel apologized and said the volume of animals Kalboro had killed was overwhelming. Ronin said it was simply wrong to let people who served Kalboro walk free. Looking at the bodies of the animals, Ronin knew Professor Vaughn would be devastated by the sight. He resolved to return to the capital, but as he was preparing to leave, the egg in his pouch started trembling. He told Assel to look, but Assel was already fixated on something else. Assel told Ronin to look up. When Ronin raised his eyes, he saw the blood from all the dead animals floating into the air. The blood gathered together and drifted toward Ronin and Assel. Ronin prepared to slash at it, but then he noticed his egg lifting into the air. The egg glided toward the mass of blood and began to absorb it. Assel asked what was happening. Ronin said he wasn't sure, but he was certain that whatever was inside that egg was no ordinary creature. After the egg absorbed all the blood, it began to crack open. Ronin watched, barely able to contain his excitement. He wanted to see what would emerge from it. The moment it hatched, the creature attacked Ronin's nose. Ronin was stunned that it attacked him immediately. When he looked at the dream bird, he was certain that was no bird. Assel said it looked like a dragon. Ronin thought so too. He wondered what kind of place Mars had been in for Mars to produce such a unique egg. Ronin told the dragon it shouldn't have attacked his nose as the first thing it did upon meeting him. When the dragon heard that, it used magic to heal Ronin's nose. Assel was astonished. A newborn dragon that could cast healing magic, and it already seemed attached to Ronin. Ronin was pleased to have found a creature with such varied abilities. Assel suggested they come up with a name for it. While they were thinking, the dragon sensed something nearby and shot off toward it. Assel wondered where it was going. Ronin was impressed the dragon had already detected the presence of another person. On the other side of the forest, Booz, a boy from the Aran district, Dim Branch, was running for his life. He had gone to run an errand, and when he returned, all the hunting dogs and his boss were dead. When he went to investigate, he found Ronin and Assel standing in the middle of a sea of blood. He turned and ran. Unfortunately for him, the dragon gave chase. Booz tripped on a stick and went down. The dragon caught up and began draining his blood. Booz screamed. Luckily, Ronin called the dragon, whom he had named Sita, off before it did serious damage. Assel was surprised Ronin had already settled on a name. Ronin said it had come to him naturally. The dragon seemed to like it too. Booz looked over at Ronin standing near the sea of blood and wondered if Ronin was Sita's owner. Ronin asked Booz if he was alright. Booz thanked him for stepping in and asked how Ronin knew his name. Ronin pressed his sword to Booz's neck and told him he didn't need to know that. He asked Booz how things had been going and how well he had been doing his poaching work as a bloodhound. Booz was shaken. No one had ever called him a bloodhound because he was just a common errand boy. Ronin knew that Booz would eventually rise to become a bloodhound in the organization because Booz had been one of the soldiers who had served under him. Ronin told Booz he had something he wanted him to do. After finishing with Booz, Ronin filled a container with water from Fernando Spring. Assel was puzzled and asked why. When they returned to the capital, Ronin sold the spring water to Maria's father at a very high price. He knew it would fetch an extraordinary sum because it had come directly from a man of Vane. Ronin felt he owed a great debt to Professor Vaughn. Without him, they would never have obtained such a large sum of money. He and Assel decided to go pay Vaughn a visit, but when they reached his door, a notice was posted saying he was away on a research trip. Ronin was disappointed. He had wanted Vaughn to meet Sita, knowing how curious Vaughn had been about what would hatch from the egg. Still, Ronin was grateful to Vaughn. Thanks to him, he had obtained a map of Kalboro's branches and had reunited with an old soldier. When Ronin had encountered Booz, he had made sure to leave a deep enough impression of fear that Booz would never even think of betraying him. Assel asked Ronin what he planned to do with the money, since Ronin was exempt from paying tuition as the salutatorian of the martial arts department. Thinking it over, Ronin realized the entrance ceremony would be happening soon. A few days later, Irol arrived at the capital's carriage station. She was speechless at the beauty of the capital. When she stepped out, she found Ronin waiting for her. Ronan asked if anything had happened while he was gone. Iroh was taken aback. She was the one who had been worried sick about him. She said that when she woke up one morning, there was a fine carriage outside her home, and the coachman told her Ronan had arranged for her to be brought to the city. She asked Ronan how he had possibly paid for something like that when he had no money. She took his face in her hands and asked if he was eating enough. Ronan told her not to fuss over him and that he was eating fine. That seemed to settle her. She asked what was perched on his shoulder. Ronan introduced her to Sita and explained that Sita would be staying with him for the time being. Then he grabbed Iroh's hand and told her he didn't have much time left before he had to enter the academy, and there was something he really wanted to do first. Ronan brought Iroh to a clothing store. When Iroh tried on the dresses, she said it was too expensive. Ronan told the attendants to bag every single dress his sister had tried on. Iroh was staggered. She had tried on a great many. Ronan told her it was her turn to receive something from him. Iroh was overwhelmed with happiness. She started cheering loudly about what a wonderful little brother she had. Ronan did his best to get her to stop before she caused a scene. After the attendants packaged everything up, Ronan told her they needed to head to the blacksmith's workshop to get a new sword. His had been ruined by a certain someone who had lost her mind. As he was about to walk out of the store, he found Shallan waiting outside. Ronan and Sita were both unsettled to see him. Ronan asked how he had known to find him there. Shallan said he had come to the area to replace his sword, which Ronan had ruined, and had happened to spot him entering the store and decided to wait. Ronan called him a stalker and told him his own sword was in worse shape. He told Shallan they would settle whose sword was more broken. Shallan was ready to fight. Iroh stepped in and told Ronan to stop being rude. Ronan tried to defend himself, but Iroh told him not to talk back. When Shallan saw that, he was dumbstruck. He couldn't believe Ronan had an older sister. Iroh apologized to Shallan on Ronan's behalf. The moment Shallan looked at Iroh, he was completely overwhelmed by her beauty. He thought he was looking at a goddess. He began to shake, unsure how to respond. After regaining his composure, he told Iroh that he was entirely to blame for the misunderstanding. Iroh was delighted to meet such a courteous nobleman and couldn't believe Ronan had such a decent friend. She asked Shallan to look after him. Shallan promised he would. Ronan could only stare in disbelief at Shallan's sudden change in demeanor. Shallan said he wanted to make up for ruining Ronan's sword. He didn't have any gold on him, so instead he handed Iroh his family's proof of identification. He explained it would be accepted anywhere in the Empire. Ronan nearly choked in shock. The Grania family's proof of identification was a document capable of purchasing entire villages, and Shallan had just handed it over to his sister. Ronan didn't remember Shallan ever behaving like this before. Shallan directed Iroh to a blacksmith on the western end of the street and told her the shop was exclusive, ordinarily closed to commoners. But with the Grania family's proof of identification, they would be welcomed inside and could obtain a truly exceptional sword. After saying that, he left. Ronan stood in silence, struggling to process what had just happened. At the academy's entrance ceremony, Krava addressed the students. He told them that each of them possessed remarkable ability and limitless potential. He told them that combined with the teachings they would receive, they would be remembered by the Empire. After his remarks, he congratulated them on their entry. Ronan wasn't particularly interested in the speech, but he was glad it was happening because it made Iroh beam with pride. After Krava's speech concluded, he snapped his fingers. Everyone felt a wave of magic pass over them. Assel tugged at Ronan's sleeve and told him to look up. When Ronan looked, the sky appeared to be splitting apart, and in an instant, he and all of his classmates were transported to an arena. Ronan could not believe Krava had teleported that many people with a single snap. Krava informed the freshman students that they were about to have their first encounter with their seniors. This event, the senior-junior meeting, occurs between first-year students and their second-year counterparts. It is known to be an intense affair. In it, the top 2 ranked freshmen are called to face one of 4 seniors, each with their own distinct fighting style. Krava told the audience that the event exists so students can compete against each other and identify their own shortcomings, the most effective method of learning in his view. He told the students that the freshmen would be allowed to choose their opponents and could decline to duel if they wished. Ronan bristled at hearing this. He believed the whole thing had been designed to put the freshmen in their place. The 4 seniors Ronan and Shallan would face were Nasto, rank 1 of the martial arts department, Brum, rank 2, Irina, rank 3, and Karen, rank 4. Brum announced he was looking forward to facing both the Empire's rising star and the one who had beaten the Empire's rising star. Ronan was pleased at the chance to face these martial artists. He wanted to show Iroh that he was strong enough to stand against anyone, and he also wanted to demonstrate to her how well he and Shallan got along. While he was considering his approach, Krava called for the duel to begin. Ronan immediately raised his hand and asked whether he could make a suggestion. Krava told him to go ahead. Ronan said that since they were free to choose their opponents, he would like to face all 4 seniors at once. Krava was taken aback. The seniors were furious, and what made it worse was that Ronan asked them to come at him together. Krava turned to neighbor Rose to ask how she wanted to handle it. She told Krava to let Ronan do what he wanted. She said that at their school, if someone had the ability, they had the right to act accordingly. She said she would step in if the fight turned dangerous. Hearing this, Krava allowed it. The 4 second years were seething at Ronan's audacity. Irina assumed his arrogance stemmed from having placed second in the practical. Nasto told the others to settle down. He acknowledged that while Ronan was cocky, he had bested Shallan in the practical, so they shouldn't underestimate him. They needed to go at him with full force. When Iril saw the intensity building around the arena, she shouted at Ronan to forfeit if he thought he might get hurt. Ronan looked over at her and smiled to reassure her. Once everyone was in position, Krava called for the match to begin. Nasto moved immediately, charging at Ronan at full speed. Ronan slipped the attack. As he did, he could tell that both Nasto and the 3 others were significantly stronger than Maria. After Ronan avoided Nasto, Irina came at him with dual short swords. Ronan deflected the blows. While Irina had him occupied, Karen thrust his spear at Ronan from behind her. Ronan was impressed by the quality of their coordination. Karen drove the spear forward and sent Ronan stumbling. As Ronan was recovering, he sensed Brum directly behind him, giant sword raised in the air. Brum expressed his disappointment. He had wanted a one-on-one with Ronan, but Ronan had let him down. Then he brought the sword down. Ronan understood the tactic. Brum's strike was meant to be the decisive blow, with the other 3 ready to attack the moment he was off balance. He was genuinely impressed by how intelligent and well-coordinated they were. But before Brum could connect, Ronan was simply gone. All 4 of them stared in bewilderment. Only Irina was fast enough to register how quickly Ronan had moved. Before she could respond, Ronan tore through all 4 of them at blinding speed. To his surprise, Brum was still standing. He couldn't believe Brum had the will to keep going after that. Just as Brum was winding up for another attack, Ronan recognized the stance and remembered what neighbor Rose had shown him during the test. He launched 3 slashes in quick succession, copied from that demonstration. Brum's sword shattered. Brum collapsed. After defeating all 4, Ronan thanked them and told them he had learned a great deal. Iril and everyone else in the arena were stunned into silence, and then erupted in cheers. The 4 seniors were left staggered. Nasto said he had no argument with how he had lost and marveled at what kind of person Ronan actually was. When the duel concluded, Iril grabbed the man next to her and announced to him that Ronan was her brother. Ronan was deeply relieved. This meant Iril would worry about him far less while he stayed at the academy. Ronan told his seniors they had performed admirably. The 4 were surprised to hear that. Ronan told them he had been eager to get into Phil Leon Academy, so he had given everything he had, and they had been much stronger than he had expected. He thanked them for accepting his challenge. Asel and Maria exchanged a bewildered look, convinced Ronan had lost his mind. Ronan asked the seniors to forgive the disrespect he had shown them earlier, and said he hoped to learn many things from them going forward. The seniors didn't quite know how to respond. Then Brum rose to his feet and declared that Ronan was an outstanding junior. He said that while Ronan had been rude at first, he now saw him as a young swordsman of real character. He took Ronan's hand and lifted it in the air in recognition. Ronan had performed the social calculation deliberately. He wanted Iril to have no cause to worry about him while he was at the academy. While Ronan was on the stage, a mysterious girl had her eyes fixed on him. That evening, the students gathered in the dining hall to eat. They had been told there would be an entrance banquet. Ronan expected a modest student dinner, but it turned out to be a spectacular feast. Maria told him they were at the Empire's most prestigious institution. A banquet at this scale was entirely to be expected. While Maria was busy filling her plate, Asel asked Ronan whether he had seen Iril off. Ronan said he had. He told Asel she hadn't wanted to leave, still worried about him, and that he had spent some time calming her down. He had asked Sita to accompany and protect her, knowing that nothing, no monster or person, was a genuine threat to Sita. Asel was surprised Ronan had gone to such lengths for his sister. After talking with Asel, Ronan reached for his food. Before he could take a bite, Shallan appeared behind him and asked if he was really eating in peace. Ronan was deeply irritated. He asked Shallan if he was looking for another fight. Shallan said he wanted to confirm some things. Ronan told him to ask. Shallan asked whether Iril's home was far from the capital. Ronan was caught off guard. Shallan followed up by asking whether bandits were common on the road to her home and whether Ronan had made sure she had enough protection. Ronan didn't know how to answer. Shallan told Ronan that he must have ensured Iroh had adequate security before she left. Ronan was irritated and told Shallan that unless a wyvern showed up, his sister would be fine. Shallan was horrified to hear that Ronan apparently hadn't prepared for wyvern-level threats. Ronan stared at him. He asked Shallan why he was making this about his sister and whether Shallan actually thought Iroh had feelings for him. Shallan started trembling. He told Ronan that as a knight, he simply wanted to make sure a woman got home safely. While Ronan and Shallan were bickering, a young girl accompanied by a group of boys approached them. She was the same mysterious girl who had been watching Ronan on the stage. She seemed surprised to see Shallan, who she called the Wolf of Grania, talking so much. Shallan bristled at her presence and asked what she wanted. The girl introduced herself as Zabit Alia, placing first in the magic department. Zabit told Shallan she hadn't come for him. She was there to speak with Ronan. Ronan was surprised to hear this. Shallan told her to go ahead, saying he was finished with Ronan anyway. As Shallan was walking off, he told Ronan he wanted to send some of his family's guards to protect Iroh. Ronan told him to get lost. Assel pulled Ronan aside and reminded him what Zabit had done during the senior-junior meeting. Ronan said he remembered. She had been completely dominant. He felt she had used more magic than necessary against her opponent. Zabit said she had simply wanted to make a point. She then told Ronan that the talent he had displayed during the duel was quite something, and that she wanted to extend to him an offer he couldn't have imagined. She reached into her pocket and produced a necklace with a purple pendant. Ronan recognized it immediately. It was the Acalia invitation. The Acalias differed from other noble families in that they placed talent above bloodline above all else. They had gathered so many gifted individuals that they had become one of the two pillars supporting the empire. They extended this invitation to anyone who showed exceptional promise. The necklace was the symbol of that invitation. Zabit was surprised that Ronan didn't ask her what it was. She asked him whether he already knew. Ronan said someone had told him about it once before. In his past life, Grand Commander Ezenakalu had told Ronan that she had joined the Acalia family through that very necklace. She had explained that anyone who wished to join would be tested by the Patriarch, and that genuinely talented individuals would pass without difficulty. She had also told Ronan that once he atoned for his failings through his achievements in the war, he would receive the invitation because she believed he was truly gifted. She told him she hoped he would make the right choice. She said that even though he had been born a beast, if he continued living among sheep, he would eventually become one too. After saying that, she had left. Assel exhaled in relief that Zabit had gone. Ronan was quietly happy to receive the necklace, believing the Acalias would prove to be a valuable resource. Phil Leon Academy is an institution that places a student's ability above everything else, and one's standing can significantly shape the experience. This is most apparent in the dormitory system. Nishia Hall is assigned to mid-ranking students. Each resident gets a private room, access to a high-quality cafeteria, and comfortable amenities. Students who make up the bottom 30% are placed in Prayer Hall. When the new students saw its condition, they broke into an uproar. They declared they were nobles and couldn't possibly be expected to live there. They demanded better accommodations and servants. The attendant told them that no staff worked in this hall, for students shared a room, and the bathrooms were communal. The students were appalled. The attendant said it wasn't his problem. They would need to study harder if they didn't want to end up back here next semester. The top 10%, however, were placed in near Dronzer Hall. When Ronan stepped into his room, he was stunned. He couldn't believe they had set up something this extraordinary for students. Looking around, he found a sheet of paper on the table listing all the classes the academy offered. He was supposed to select the ones he wanted to attend and submit his choices. He knew it would be wiser to start light since he still needed to adjust to academy life, but he couldn't bring himself to do that. Every class seemed fascinating. After careful thought, Ronan registered for nearly all of them. He figured that since he was here at Phil Leon Academy, he should make the most of it and learn everything. When Ronan attended his first class, Empire Swordsmanship Basics, the instructor, Mr. Abar, told him he no longer needed to be there. Ronan was baffled and said he had just started. Mr. Abar was equally baffled. He told Ronan he had already mastered every single fundamental of the Empire's swordsmanship techniques. The Academy's policy required professors to let students leave once they had completed the entire syllabus. He couldn't keep Ronan in class. It would discourage the other students. He told Ronan to keep pushing himself and not become complacent. Later that day, Ronan sat by a river and sulked. He had been turned away from other classes too, archery, monster hunting, and others. He had never imagined his school experience would look anything like this. While wondering what to do, he heard a voice ask him why he wasn't in class. He turned around to find that it was instructor neighbor Rose. She immediately understood what had happened. Ronan had already finished every class he had signed up for. Ronan asked whether all his classes were going to be like this and told her he had expected more from Phil Leon Academy. Neighbor Rose was genuinely surprised he had already completed most of them, though it made sense, since he had copied her technique after just one look. She said that as his instructor, it was her responsibility to make sure he actually learned something. She asked him for his sword. He didn't understand what she intended. She took it. He was annoyed and asked what she was going to do with it. While he was talking, there was an explosion in the river. Ronan watched in shock. Neighbor Rose looked disappointed. The sword had only produced an explosion. She placed it down and told Ronan that what he carried couldn't be called a proper weapon. It wore its owner out. She told him to watch carefully as she demonstrated something. She drew her sword with fluid precision and split the river clean in two. Ronan was speechless. He was certain he could replicate the motion, but he understood that hers was on an entirely different plane. Neighbor Rose put her sword away and asked if he understood now what he was missing. A weapon is a piece of metal, solid and sharp, meant to be used in combat. It shouldn't break under the user, and if it does, another can be found. Ronan had always treated weapons as disposable until that moment. He watched Neighbor Rose use her weapon and realized he had never thought about it that way. Neighbor Rose told Ronan he needed to be smart about his weapon. On a real battlefield, wasting energy could get him killed. She told him that if he intended to channel mana, he needed to find a weapon suited to him. She also revealed that she knew he couldn't yet use mana. Ronan was surprised. She told him it was remarkable that he could fight with such intensity without it, and that one day he would access mana. But when that time came, he would need a proper blade capable of containing that power. She told him to come to her class. Ronan was startled and asked whether he was actually allowed to. Neighbor Rose explained that only second-year students and above could normally attend, but she was willing to make an exception under one condition. He had to find a proper weapon first. In the next scene, Ronan, Asel, and Maria are together. Ronan explained to them what had happened with instructor Neighbor Rose. After hearing it, Asel understood why Ronan had brought them to the forge Shallan had recommended. Maria and Asel were taken aback when they arrived. Maria told Ronan the place was far too run down and looked ready to fall apart at any moment. She questioned whether the Grania family had really ever used such a sorry-looking shop. Ronan told her they would have to go inside to find out. When they entered, they found themselves in a dusty, cobweb-filled interior. Ronan couldn't believe the inside was even worse than the outside. He trusted Shallan wouldn't have directed him here without good reason, so he was puzzled. While they were looking around, a creature came lumbering out from the back room. It was covered in thick fur. Asel and Maria were frightened at the sight. Ronan was simply amazed. He had never expected to encounter a wolf beastman in a forge. The beastman fixed them with an imposing stare and demanded to know who they were. When nobody answered right away, he told them to get out. Ronan held up the Grania family insignia and said he had come to purchase a weapon, adding that Shallan had sent him because this forge was known for top-tier arms. The beastman looked Ronan and his friends over. He noticed the mana surrounding Asel and Maria. He told Ronan the insignia meant nothing to him and asked whether he was from the Grania family. He said he didn't know who had leaked the location of their forge, but it didn't matter. They didn't accept customers like Ronan. Ronan was irritated. The beastman licked his fangs and eyed Ronan in an unsettling way. He told Ronan there was one way for him to get what he wanted: hand over Asel's arm. He said he hadn't eaten in a while, so Ronan would actually be doing him a favor. Asel was terrified and assured the beastman he tasted awful. As the beastman moved toward Asel, Ronan fixed him with a cold look and told him he had just made a serious error. He drove his sword into the beastman's gut. The beastman was pushed back. Ronan noticed something strange when his sword connected. He asked how the beastman had managed to get hold of armor. The beastman was still recovering from the pain and couldn't immediately respond. Ronan said he didn't need an answer. He would just destroy the armor. The beastman's attitude shifted instantly. He told Ronan it had been a test. Ronan didn't follow. The beastman explained that it was standard procedure to verify the abilities of any unfamiliar visitor. He also admitted he had wanted to test his invisible armor and had provoked Ronan on purpose for that reason. Ronan told him not to expect him to swallow that excuse. The beastman said their forge supplied weapons to the Grania family. It would be strange if they didn't screen newcomers first. He told Ronan to check with Shallan if he didn't believe him. He apologized to Ronan for for pushing things too far and apologized to Assel for frightening him. He had no intention of actually eating a human. Assel was relieved. The Beastman introduced himself as Daiden, an apprentice at the forge, and sometimes its gatekeeper. He explained the area they were standing in was only the entrance. The actual forge was in the back room. After they walked through, Daiden told them to brace themselves. He pressed a button on the wall, and the floor began to descend. Ronin and his companions were astonished. None of them had ever seen anything like an elevator before. Daiden told Ronin it was an elevator powered by a magic stone and a pulley system, the fastest route to the real forge. After some time, the descent slowed. Daiden welcomed them to the largest forge in the empire. This place was known as Grand Capidu. As Ronin and his companions walked through Kadak, they passed countless blacksmiths crafting all manner of swords and weapons. Ronin couldn't believe such a place existed. Daiden told Ronin that the forge supplied weapons exclusively to the royal family and the nobility. Every blacksmith in the hall was highly skilled, but the greatest among them was the elder dwarf, a master who had been working metal for 400 years. Daiden warned Ronin that the elder was stubborn, but his craftsmanship was unrivaled. He then kicked the elder's door open without a trace of hesitation and announced he had brought guests. The moment the elder recognized Daiden's voice, he scolded him for the noise. He needed quiet while working. Daiden said he'd had to kick the door because there were weapons stacked in front of it, and told the elder, whose name was Doran, to clean up his shop. Doran told Daiden he complained too much for someone so young. He then asked Daiden whether the guests were skilled, since he had brought them to him. Daiden said he had tested Ronin personally and was confident he was exceptional. Doran looked at Ronin and wasn't convinced. To him, Ronin looked like a child. He told Ronin to demonstrate his swordsmanship so he could see for himself. Ronin drew his sword, ready to perform. When Doran spotted the blade, he immediately called it garbage and smashed it with his hammer. He asked if Ronin had been relying on that sword for long. Ronin was stunned. He was furious at watching the sword he had worked to earn get destroyed in an instant. He demanded to know what Doran thought he was doing. Doran pointed at the swords lying around on the floor and told Ronin to pick any one of them. He explained he wouldn't have been able to properly assess Ronin's technique with such a poor quality blade, and that any sword Ronin chose from the floor would be his for free. Every single one of them was 100 times better than what he'd been carrying. Ronin was taken aback. Daiden nodded at him to confirm it was true. When Ronin picked one up, he could feel immediately that it was different, though he wasn't sure yet how much it would change things. Before demonstrating, he warned Doran that if anything was destroyed, it wasn't his fault. Doran told him he didn't care what got broken. He just needed Ronin to show his swordsmanship without holding back. Hearing that, Ronin decided to attempt the same slash he had seen neighbor Rose perform. He took his stance. Doran recognized the posture the moment Ronin settled into it. Ronin recreated the slash. The scene cuts, and there is an explosion. The other blacksmiths in the hall were startled by the thunderous sound. They looked toward Doran's workshop, wondering if a blast furnace had gone off. Back in the room, Ronin and Doran stared at the wreckage around them. Ronin told Doran he hadn't meant to cause that much destruction. Doran asked Ronin if he was neighbor Rose's apprentice. Ronin was surprised and asked if Doran knew her. Doran told him he was the one who had forged neighbor Rose's sword. Ronin was astonished. He thought back to how perfectly balanced and fluid that long blade had been. Doran told Ronin that neighbor Rose's long sword was called the Secret Sword, Yusa, and that it was one of the few true masterpieces of his life. Ronin told Doran he had never expected the sword to amplify his strike to this degree. Doran told Ronin that he had initially taken him for a show-off who didn't know his own limits, then hit him and admitted it had been a long time since he'd seen someone this talented. He told Ronin that being too gifted created its own problem because it would be very difficult to forge a blade suited to his strength. He told him the sword he had just used was already beginning to crack from a single swing. Ronin asked how to solve it. Doran told him he would use the finest steel available and fuse it with a special material, and that if Ronin could bring him a byproduct of a wyvern, he might be able to forge him a worthy sword. The moment Ronin heard the word byproduct, he pulled out Sita's eggshell and asked whether that would work. When Doran struck the shell with his mithril hammer, he went still. The hammer hadn't left a single mark. He rushed to ask Ronin if he could actually use that shell. Ronin told him it was useless to him and asked whether it was enough material to forge a sword. Doran's face lit up. He told Ronin to return in 2 weeks. He promised to make Ronin the finest sword in the entire empire. He also told Asel and Maria to go browse the other masters. They were welcome to choose weapons for themselves. Maria was stunned. Doran told her he couldn't send the companions of someone so valuable away empty-handed. He told them to use his name when speaking to the other masters so they'd be well looked after. He said he would have loved to make weapons for them himself, but he couldn't do anything else until the eggshell was fully smelted. After saying so, he set to work immediately, hammering the shell with full force. The sound it produced thrilled him to no end. Watching the old man, Ronin had absolutely no doubt that he was completely out of his mind. Deep beneath Capid Dew, a man in white robes was fuming at the constant noise from the blacksmiths. He muttered that he wanted to set them all ablaze. A woman also dressed in white told him to keep himself in check. It was not yet time for them to show themselves. Standing before a collection of large stone statues, she said it wouldn't be much longer before they could act freely. She said they would begin with the oblivious blacksmiths, and from there, they would drive the empire to its knees. Gazing at an enormous statue suspended within a crystal, the woman said that the day everything was erased and consumed by light was drawing near. A few days later, Ronin found himself reflecting on the fact that the empire's greatest blacksmith was currently forging his new sword, while his friends were waiting on their own weapons from different smiths. He knew these custom arms would cost a fortune, but he wasn't worried about the expense since he had used the prestigious Grania family insignia to cover the entire bill. His only real grievance was the timeline. It would be quite a while before his blade was finished. Wandering around the campus, he wondered how he would pass the time, especially since Asel and Maria were busy attending their classes, leaving him with no one to talk to. His aimless stroll eventually brought him to a stop in front of the Gallon Building, an exclusive training and lecture center reserved for upper-class students. Ronin recalled that instructor Navy Rose held her sessions here as well. She had previously commanded him to join her class once he obtained a proper weapon. Though he had been actively avoiding her, he figured his temporary blade was sufficient enough to finally show up. As he stood there weighing his options, Navy Rose suddenly materialized right beside him. Her terrifying aura left Ronin frozen with fear, completely at a loss for words. Without hesitation, Navy Rose grabbed him by the ear, demanding to know why he hadn't been attending her lectures despite possessing a weapon. When she flatly accused him of skipping, Ronin tried to protest and explain himself, but she refused to give him a chance to speak. Maintaining her painful grip on his ear, she ordered him to follow her while he loudly begged for release. His shouts of agony caught the attention of a girl carrying a stack of files inside the building. Stopping to peer out the window, the girl wondered who could possibly be making such a noise. Distracted, she was suddenly bumped into by another student. Instead of apologizing, the boy sharply told her to get out of his way. The girl immediately began bowing and apologizing to the boy, whose name was Cardan. Cardan sneered, calling her incredibly slow for a teacher's assistant and labeling her a loser before telling her to hurry up and prepare for the day's lesson. Gathering her fallen papers, she assured him she would take care of it right away. Meanwhile, the students had gathered in the primary sparring hall where Navy Rose stood ready to address them. She He introduced Ronin to the class, announcing that he would be joining their ranks. Ronin bowed respectfully to his new seniors, prompting a wave of hushed whispers. Some were astounded that a freshman had skipped ahead to join their advanced class, while others muttered that he didn't look nearly as formidable as the rumors suggested. The seniors' gossiping irritated Ronin, though his mood brightened slightly when he spotted a few familiar faces, until he noticed Shilon among them, which dampened his spirits. Just then, the teaching assistant rushed into the hall, breathlessly apologizing to Navy Rose for her tardiness. Hearing her voice, Ronin felt an instant jolt of recognition. He knew he had heard that exact tone before. The girl ran up to the instructor, anxiously asking if she was terribly late, but Navy Rose told her to catch her breath and not to worry. The instructor then directed her to introduce herself to Ronin. Walking over with a warm smile, the girl introduced herself as Adon, a second-year martial arts major serving as the teaching assistant. Ronin stared at her in disbelief. In his past life, Adeshanelia was renowned for her brilliant tactical mind and unparalleled command on the battlefield. As the first woman to achieve the rank of Grand Commander, she had dominated wars with her icy composure and flawless leadership, earning the fearsome title of the Iron Lady. Her subordinates used to whisper that blood didn't run through her veins, only cold iron. Having served under her command, Ronin never imagined he would see her with such a bright, lively expression. It was clear to him that the young Adeshan standing before him had no memory of the regression. He briefly contemplated whether he should fulfill the final request she made before her death, but his thoughts were interrupted when he noticed how poorly she was being treated. The other students were constantly pestering her, demanding she teach them or ordering her around on trivial errands. Adeshan was acting less like an assistant and more like a common servant, leaving Ronin completely baffled as to why she tolerated such treatment. While he was watching this unfold, Cardan walked up to him and abruptly demanded a duel. Startled by the sudden challenge, Ronin asked for clarification. Cardan introduced himself as a third-year student, explaining that he had heard incredible rumors about Ronin's entrance exam and wanted to test his skills in a match. Ronin declined, stating his mind was occupied with other matters at the moment. Cardan scoffed, assuming Ronin was backing down because he wasn't carrying his primary weapon. Turning toward Adeshan, Cardan barked at her, calling her a loser and ordering her to fetch his spear. Adeshan quickly turned to comply. Ronin's blood boiled. He couldn't believe this arrogant idiot had the audacity to call a future Grand Commander a loser, nor could he tolerate the disrespectful way the bastard spoke to her. When Adeshan returned and handed over the weapon, Cardan's temper flared. He called her an idiot, demanding to know why she brought a long spear when he had switched his focus to a short spear. Startled, Adeshan apologized, explaining that she had brought the long spear because it was what he had utilized in their previous session. Angered by her explanation, Cardan began repeatedly striking her on the head with the weapon, shouting that she had no right to talk back to him. He sneered that she didn't even have the talent to attend this class, and only got in by begging Navy Rose. Yet she couldn't even handle basic chores. He demanded to know if she lacked a conscience or any sense of shame. Unable to watch any longer, Ronin stepped forward and firmly grabbed Cardan's spear. Blinking in surprise, Cardan demanded to know what he was doing. With a chilling expression, Ronin replied that he wasn't sure what he might do next, but he was officially accepting the challenge. When Cardan blinked in confusion, Ronin glared at him with terrifying intensity, calling him a loser bastard and reiterating that the duel was on. Cardan was taken aback by the sudden hostility. He asked if Ronin was picking a fight over a mere commoner, licking his lips disgustingly as he asked if Ronin was protecting Adeshan just because they shared lowborn status. In response, Ronin shoved the spear back into Cardan's hands, warning him to defend himself if he didn't want to die. Drawing a wooden training sword, Ronin launched a fierce attack. Cardan was shocked by the sheer weight of the blow. It seemed impossible for someone to wield that much raw power without utilizing any mana. Pushing Cardan back with his blade, Ronin remarked that since his opponent had complained so much about using a long spear, he would fix that problem immediately. With a swift motion, Ronin shattered Cardan's spear clean in half. Asking if the weapon was more to his liking now, Ronin watched as a furious Cardan rushed him, screaming that Ronin would pay for humiliating him. The moment Cardan closed the distance, Ronin systematically sliced the remaining pieces of the spear to shreds, telling the third year to worry about his own safety rather than his opponent's. Ronan unleashed a brutal, merciless beating. He completely shattered Cardan's face and hip until the older student lost consciousness and collapsed to the floor, standing over his prone body. Ronan muttered that the bastard should be grateful they were inside the academy grounds, because if they had met in the outside world, he would be a corpse. The watching students stood frozen in utter disbelief, unable to comprehend how Cardan, one of the top-ranked third years, had been completely dismantled by a freshman. Turning his terrifying gaze toward the crowd, Ronan walked up to a female student who had previously ordered Audition around. He told the mannerless brat that if her towel smelled so bad, she should wash it herself. With a menacing glare, he asked if she mistook Audition for her personal maid. The girl petrified under his stare. Ronan told her to step forward because he was going to thrash her next. Horrified by the escalating violence, Audition rushed between them, pleading with Ronan to stop. She insisted she didn't understand why he was doing this and assured him she was perfectly fine. Ronan told her to step aside, explaining that he absolutely could not control his temper when she was being degraded by a pack of idiots. In his eyes, no one in the entire empire possessed the right to look down on or abuse her. Shoving her gently to the side, he declared he wouldn't stop until he beat every single student in the room. "Cease this at once," Navy Rose commanded. Instantly, an overwhelming, invisible pressure locked Ronan in place. Releasing a terrifying aura, the instructor stated that she wouldn't hold him accountable for the clash with Cardan, as unpredictable violence was a reality of actual combat. However, she warned that if he escalated the situation any further, she would no longer tolerate his behavior. She ordered him to drop his weapon and stand down. Trying to turn his head, Ronan realized he was completely paralyzed by her presence. When he finally managed to look back at Navy Rose, he didn't see a human. He saw a colossal, monstrous serpent looming over him, ready to swallow him whole. He was stunned by the staggering aura of the legendary Sword Saint. Navy Rose flatly noted that his current actions could no longer be classified as a sanctioned duel, and as the person running the class, she could not allow the room to descend into further chaos. Glaring back, Ronan countered that she must have known exactly how her teaching assistant was being treated, yet she chose to do absolutely nothing to stop it. Navy Rose replied coldly that the matter did not concern him, delivering her final warning for him to stand down. Ronan spat back that he didn't care if she was the unprecedented Sword Saint, telling her to get lost. A flash of sadness crossed Navy Rose's face before she unleashed her technique, Grieving Snake. The terrifying attack rushed toward Ronan, and the world went dark. The scene shifts to a memory of the past. Ronan was standing beside Grand Commander Audition. He remembered asking her why she had volunteered for the commander position when everyone else had actively refused the responsibility. Audition had smiled gently, telling him that one day he would understand that there are certain burdens you cannot force onto someone else, because it is simply your destiny to bear them. Ronan had always pondered what she meant by those words, wondering about the immense weight she carried entirely on her own shoulders. He vividly recalled her final moments, when she had sincerely apologized for passing her heavy burden on to him, begging him never to forgive her for her sins. With a sudden gasp, Ronan bolted upright on a bed, screaming. He looked around wildly, realizing he was in a medical ward. "What's wrong? Did you have a nightmare?" a voice asked. Turning his head, Ronan was stunned to see Audition sitting beside him. "General," Ronan breathed out. Audition blinked in confusion, asking him what on earth he was talking about. Realizing his slip, Ronan forced a laugh, rubbing the back of his neck and telling her not to mind him as he had just made a mistake. Though highly perplexed by his odd behavior, Audition dropped the matter. Ronan asked if he was currently resting in the school infirmary. She confirmed he was, explaining that Navy Rose had instructed her to bring him there. She added that the instructor had also left a message. She promised to personally correct Ronan's behavior during mandatory supplementary classes. Hearing this, Ronan instantly knew he was in deep trouble and that Navy Rose was going to absolutely slaughter him. After delivering the warning, Audition looked at him hesitantly, asking if he had fought so fiercely earlier because he was angry on her behalf. Ronan flinched at the direct question. Looking away quickly, he claimed that he only intervened because he was an upright, honorable gentleman who placed a high value on proper manners. Audition saw right through the excuse, noting with a soft smile that he was a terrible liar. She gently urged him not to harbor too much hatred toward Cardan or the other students, explaining that she fully understood why they treated her the way they did. Ronan's expression darkened with anger. He He told her flatly that she had done absolutely nothing wrong outside of working diligently as a teaching assistant, demanding to know why she was even subjecting herself to the role in the first place. He explained that while he could almost overlook the students' atrocious behavior because they were young and arrogant, he could never accept an instructor turning a blind eye to such blatant abuse. He asked her if she didn't feel even a shred of resentment toward Navy Rose. Adeshan smiled gently, telling him not to misunderstand the situation. She revealed that the only reason Navy Rose ignored the bullying was because Adeshan herself had explicitly requested it. Ronan stared at her, completely shocked, wondering if she had lost her mind. Adeshan explained that she was currently enjoying privileges she hadn't earned. She revealed that a student normally needed to reach the rank of sword expert just to qualify for Navy Rose's advanced lectures. Yet even after taking a full 1-year leave of absence from school, she could still barely manipulate her aura. Ronan was deeply startled. He found it hard to reconcile the fact that the legendary Grand Commander, who once wielded an overwhelming presence on the battlefield, was currently this powerless. Adeshan continued, explaining that she had begged Navy Rose to ignore how the other students treated her because she didn't want to become an extra burden to the instructor who had kindly taken her on as an assistant. Since she was receiving special treatment by being allowed in the room, she felt enduring the humiliation was the fair price she had to pay. Assuring him she could handle the burden, she thanked him sincerely for stepping in, admitting that while she thought she had grown numb to the petty insults, today had actually been a bit painful. Looking at her intently, Ronan asked if she was pushing herself through all this suffering simply because her ultimate goal was to become a general. Adeshan's eyes widened in surprise, completely baffled as to how a freshman could possibly know her hidden ambition. With a bright smile, she confessed that her true dream was to become the Grand Commander of the Empire. She admitted it might sound completely foolish coming from someone who hadn't even achieved the level of a sword expert, but she had no intention of giving up. She noted that she was highly confident in her grasp of military science and strategy, and would continue working tirelessly to reach the top. Realizing the time, she noted that her next class was about to start, telling Ronan to get some proper rest before heading back to his own lectures. Ronan thanked her for looking after him, and with a warm parting smile, she left the room. Once she was gone, Ronan stared at the ceiling as memories of her final moments flooded back. He vividly remembered her telling him that if they ever managed to meet in the past, he should strictly advise her to give up on the military path entirely and focus on becoming a tailor instead. She had smiled sadly, noting that she had tried many things in life, but had never tried making clothes. Ronan found himself caught in a massive dilemma, completely torn over whether he should actually convince the passionate young girl to abandon her grand dream for a simple life of tailoring. A few days later, Ronan, Asura, and Maria made their way to the Grand Capito Forge after receiving an urgent message from Doran. When they arrived at the workshop's entrance, the place was completely deserted. Ronan was visibly irritated. Doran had sent a carrier pigeon in the dead of night claiming he had completed a magnificent masterpiece and demanding they come collect it immediately. Looking around the empty area, Ronan accidentally stepped on a stray helmet. In a fit of annoyance, he kicked it across the room, complaining about how filthy the workshop was and muttering about the terrible customer service. Maria watched his outburst in surprise, whispering to Asura to ask why Ronan had been so incredibly touchy lately. Asura shrugged, admitting he had absolutely no idea why their friend was so angry. Turning to them, Ronan declared they were going to head straight down into the forge themselves. Maria gasped, asking if they were even allowed to trespass like that, but Ronan reminded her that Doran was the one who summoned them. Telling them to stop whining and just follow his lead, he ushered them into the lift and pressed the hidden mechanism. As the elevator began its descent, Ronan continued to grumble, calling Doran a stubborn old man with zero hospitality and promising to give him a piece of his mind the moment they met. Maria and Asura could only exchange worried glances, marveling at how reckless their friend could be. However, as the lift dropped lower, the complaints died in Ronan's throat. He froze in shock. The entire underground forge was completely engulfed in roaring flames, and the ground was littered with the unconscious bodies of smiths. Suddenly, Asura cried out, pointing frantically toward a massive rock giant that was actively hunting down the fleeing workers. Ronan stared in confusion, wondering why subterranean monsters were rampaging inside a secure forge. As Asura frantically asked what they should do, Ronan grabbed the boy tightly by the waist, hoisted him up, and planted his foot firmly on the lift's guardrails. Realizing Ronan was about to leap into the chaos, Asura panicked. Ronan barked orders at Maria, to take the lift straight back to the surface and bring back every available combat master or soldier she could find. The moment the words left his mouth, he leaped off the edge into the open cavern, shouting for Asura to activate his telekinesis. Asura quickly cast his invisible hand spell to cushion their descent. Down below, a group of cornered blacksmiths closed their eyes as a rock giant raised a massive fist to crush them. Before the blow could land, Ronin intercepted the monster from above, completely shattering its stone arm. Landing heavily on the ground, Ronin muttered that his head had been incredibly stuffy with too many thoughts lately, glaring up at the monster as he told it that it had picked the absolute worst day to cause trouble. The giant swung its remaining fist wildly at him, but Ronin easily dodged the clumsy strike. Vaulting onto the giant's arm, he sprinted up its shoulder and delivered a devastating strike that completely pulverized its head. The rescued smiths stared in absolute awe, unable to comprehend how a teenager had destroyed a fearsome rock giant in a single blow. Climbing atop the crumbling stone corpse, Ronin demanded an explanation for the chaos. The frantic smiths explained that dozens of rock giants had suddenly ambushed the forging sectors, bursting out from an unexplored underground fissure and destroying everything in sight. They had slaughtered several workers and captured a large group of blacksmiths, including Doran, before retreating back into the depths. They added that Daiden had bravely attempted to fight them off, but he too had been overpowered and abducted. The smiths wept, noting that the captured men would likely be devoured shortly if no one intervened. Hearing this, Ronin stood up and verified if the giant he just killed was the last one in the immediate area. When they confirmed it was, he turned to Asura, ordering him to coordinate with Maria to locate and heal all the wounded survivors. He told Asura to keep the magical creature Sita with him to assist with the medical treatment. Asura gasped, asking what Ronin planned to do alone. Ronin replied that he was heading down into the tunnels to retrieve the captured blacksmiths, especially since he still had a custom sword to collect from Doran. Deeper within the cavernous fissures, Doran stood clutching a blade, his hands trembling violently with fear. He looked over at Daiden, telling him that while he deeply appreciated the rescue attempt, Daiden needed to leave him behind and escape immediately. A pair of massive rock giants were currently battering against the narrow stone barricade shielding them. Doran urged Daiden to use the defensive properties of his invisible armor to slip away, but Daiden snapped at him to shut up, stating things were stressful enough without the old man spouting nonsense. Glaring through the dust, Daiden told Doran that if he had the breath to say such ridiculous things, he should start swinging his sword instead. Doran refused, stating he couldn't bear to taint his ultimate masterpiece with his own subpar swordsmanship. Daiden openly called him a crazy old lunatic for worrying about a weapon at a time like this. Just then, the barricade gave way entirely. A massive stone hand reached into the recess to crush them. Doran braced for the end, but Daiden stepped forward, successfully blocking the crushing weight of the giant's fist. The moment the impact landed, Daiden winced as the protective enchantments on his specialized armor shattered instantly from the sheer force of the blow. Seeing its target still standing, the monster drew back its fist for a second strike. Daiden closed his eyes, suddenly filled with deep regret for all the experimental armor pieces he would never get to create. Before the blow could fall, Ronin materialized behind the monster, slicing the giant into perfect stone blocks. Stepping through the dust, he thanked Daiden for holding out and told him to leave the rest of the monsters to him. Doran and Daiden stared in utter shock. Daiden stammered, asking how he had managed to navigate through the swarm of monsters filling the tunnels. Ronin grinned, casually explaining that he had already slaughtered every single giant along the path and secured the safety of the other captured smiths. The two blacksmiths could barely process the absurd claim. Reaching out his hand, Ronin looked at Doran and demanded his new sword, noting his temporary weapon was completely ruined and unusable. Doran quickly handed over the blade, mentioning that while the hilt work wasn't entirely finalized, the sword was fully functional. Thanking him, Ronin took a firm stance and drew the blade from its sheath. At that exact moment, a fresh wave of rock giants poured into the cavern chamber, rushing toward them. Deciding to test the weapon's balance, Ronin delivered a casual, light swing. To his amazement, the single motion generated a massive shockwave that instantly obliterated every single giant in the vicinity. Ronin was entirely blown away by the weapon's staggering output. Daiden stood frozen in shock, while Doran burst into ecstatic cheers over the success of his creation. Staring at the blade, Ronin asked what it was called. Doran proudly revealed the name was La Mancha, inspired by his favorite daydreamer tale. He eagerly explained that the weapon was forged to be so light it felt weightless, yet its material was significantly sturdier than mithril, allowing it to easily withstand the strain of high-level swordsmanship. Suddenly, the blade began to glow as it actively absorbed the blood of the fallen rock giants. Doran noted that despite having cast 0 enchantments on the blade, it possessed the unique ability to mend its own structural damage by drinking blood. Ronan realized the property must stem from the cedar shells used in its creation, genuinely praising Doran for his incredible craftsmanship. Doran beamed with pride, but Diden quickly cut in, pointing out how insane it was for the two of them to be standing around exchanging compliments amidst a pile of monster corpses. He reminded Ronan that they needed to evacuate immediately. Agreeing, Ronan told Diden to carry the old man out of the tunnels first, explaining that he had one final thing he needed to investigate. When Diden asked for clarification, Ronan's expression turned utterly menacing. He whispered that there was a massive rat hiding deep within the caves. Pushing past the rubble, Ronan sprinted deeper into the subterranean tunnels, completely certain he was on the trail of the true culprits. His tracking was confirmed by a highly unusual detail. Mixed within the massive indentations of the rock giants were distinct human footprints. Furthermore, he had to bypass several sophisticated magical defense wards designed to keep intruders out, proving the masterminds were incredibly organized. Following a faint sound of voices, Ronan slipped behind a large boulder to spy on the perpetrators. Peering into the clearing, he froze at the terrifying sight. Looming in the center of the cavern was a colossal rock giant that dwarfed the standard variants, its entire body encrusted with massive magical crystals. Standing beside the beast were a man and a woman clad in pristine white robes. Ronan immediately deduced that these two were responsible for the destruction of the forge and the slaughter of the smiths, though the sheer scale of the crystal giant made the monsters he had previously fought look like small children. Noting that the massive creature was entirely stationary, Ronan realized it was currently sealed under a constraint ward, bringing him a small sense of relief given its terrifying presence. As he watched, the woman suddenly turned to her companion, announcing that an intruder had entered the cavern. The man demanded verification, and she assured him she was certain, explaining that the brainwashing links she had established over the regular rock giants had just been forcefully severed by an outside force. The man cursed in annoyance, muttering that the typically incompetent Imperial soldiers had actually managed to react quickly for once. He asked what their next move should be, noting that since their vanguard giants were wiped out, they couldn't properly awaken the primary crystal giant yet. With a dark glare, he asked if he should just hunt down and eliminate the intruder himself. The woman, whom he addressed as Scylla, told the man, Edwin, not to bother. She argued that they had already successfully sabotaged the primary manufacturing facilities, which would severely cripple the Empire's military production capabilities. She warned that if their identities were exposed, a certain individual would be absolutely furious, advising that it was time to abandon the cave and retreat. Edwin scoffed, calling her entirely too rigid and cautious. Conjuring a bright flame in his palm, he asked if they should destroy the remaining evidence. Scylla told him to do whatever he pleased. Turning his gaze directly toward the boulder, Edwin yelled for Ronan to stop hiding, smiling creepily as he remarked that he could smell the sulfur of the blacksmiths radiating off him. Without warning, he unleashed a massive blast of fire magic. Though caught off guard by the speed, Ronan managed to dive clear of the explosion. Edwin praised his agility before declaring he would pin him down, instantly materializing dozens of flaming arrows in the air around Ronan. Ronan was stunned by the magician's ability to conjure such large-scale magic so rapidly, realizing Edwin was far from an ordinary caster. Pulling back his hood, Edwin asked how a mere rat had managed to penetrate their advanced security system. Ronan countered by demanding their true identities, forced to smile as he joked that even if they were desperate for an intimate meeting, a dark cave was a strange choice. Edwin chuckled, telling Scylla that killing this boy would be highly entertaining, but Scylla snapped at him to stop wasting time. Edwin assured her it would only take a moment, casually adding that it wouldn't be long before the entire empire was buried in the starlight. Hearing those exact words, Ronan's eyes turned blood red. A shockwave of pure rage hit him, as those were the precise final words spoken to him by Audi in his past life. Glaring at them with an expression of absolute malice, he demanded Edwin explain the meaning behind that phrase. Edwin blinked, startled by the sudden, terrifying shift in the boy's demeanor. Ronan declared that both of them were coming with him alive, as he had an endless list of questions to ask. Laughing mockingly, Edwin assumed the boy had gone mad from sheer terror. Igniting his hand hands once more. He asked if Ronin truly believed he had the power to capture them. The moment he raised his arm to strike, Ronin moved at a blinding, imperceptible speed. With a clean flash of La Mancha, Edwin's hand sailed through the air. Before the mage could even register the pain, a second slash severed his lower body entirely. Standing over the collapsing sorcerer with a horrifying glare, Ronin told him to shut his mouth and take his beating quietly. As Edwin screamed in agony, Scylla panicked, horrified that someone could completely bypass Edwin's reactions. Ronin instantly lunged forward, grabbing Scylla tightly by the throat and warning her to answer his questions immediately unless she wanted to share her companion's fate. Desperate, Scylla gathered her mana and deployed a powerful mana shield to blast him backward. Ronin clicked his tongue in annoyance, realizing she wouldn't cooperate easily. He noticed his hand vibrating slightly from the impact, surprised by the sheer durability of her barrier. Of course, the defense meant nothing to his new blade. Raising La Mancha, Ronin forcefully hacked forward, shattering her specialized mana barrier into millions of glowing pieces. Scylla gasped in pure terror, unable to process how a physical sword could cleanly cut through pure mana. Before she could recover, Ronin pinned her to the ground with his boot and drove his sword straight through her shoulder. As she shrieked in pain, Ronin ripped away her hood, revealing long, pointed ears. He blinked in surprise, noting she was a half-elf, utterly confused as to why a member of her race would be aligned with such dark sorcerers. He demanded to know what their ultimate objective was. Before she could speak, a massive explosion spell was fired at his back. Ronin spun around, cleanly slicing the magical projectile in half. The diverted blast detonated against the massive sealed crystal giant behind him. Ronin glanced over and frowned. He had clearly severed Edwin's limbs, yet the mage was somehow standing again, his entire body now grotesque and covered in a mass of regenerating magical vines. Edwin roared at Ronin to get away from Scylla. Seeing that the mage still hadn't grasped the reality of their situation, Ronin coldly drove his sword deep into Scylla's leg. Edwin shrieked in panic at the sudden cruelty. With a demonic expression, Ronin looked up at him, stating that both of them were completely doomed. He systematically tore the blade free and began repeatedly, brutally stabbing Scylla in the exact same wound. He gave Edwin a stark choice. Either they submit and answer every single question, or he would completely amputate her limbs right here. Ronin asked with a twisted grin whether her elven physiology would allow her limbs to grow back as quickly as Edwin's vines. Horrified by the boy's absolute ruthlessness, Edwin immediately extinguished his magic, raising his hands in total surrender. Ronin slowly pulled his bloody blade from Scylla's leg, telling the mage he was ready to listen. Ronin extracted his blade from Scylla's leg, turning to Edwin to express his own reluctance to spill further blood. As Ronin cast his gaze down to check on Scylla, he found her wearing a manic, unsettling grin. Before he could decipher the meaning behind her expression, he looked up to find the massive hand of the crystal rock giant hurtling directly toward him. Stunned, Ronin realized too late that Scylla had somehow triggered the behemoth. He instinctively raised his sword to deflect the blow, but the sheer force of the impact launched him backward, sending him crashing heavily into a solid boulder. Edwin rushed over to assess Scylla's condition. Breathing heavily, she assured him she was alive and thanked him for his timely intervention. She noted that without Edwin distracting Ronin with his previous assault, her magic would have failed to cloud Ronin's perception, preventing her from awakening the giant. Though she lamented only being able to mobilize the creature's arm, she remained confident that Ronin had sustained critical damage. Urging swift action, Edwin instructed her to retreat to the church and report the unfolding crisis while he remained behind to finish Ronin off. Scylla warned him to exercise extreme caution, labeling Ronin a monster wearing the guise of a child. Edwin assured her he would not be reckless, internally acknowledging that Ronin was far more dangerous than any ordinary youth. He knew that failing to eliminate him now would guarantee a catastrophic threat in the future, vowing to himself that he would not suffer another defeat at the boy's hands. The moment Ronin struggled back to his feet, he moved with terrifying speed, severing Edwin's lower extremities before systematically hacking him to pieces. Wearing an expression of pure malice, Ronin turned his gaze back to Scylla, reminding her that he still possessed numerous questions requiring answers. Scylla was paralyzed with dread, unable to comprehend how a mere boy could wield such horrific power. Desperate, she triggered a magical spell while panicking, demanding to know how he could still move despite his severe trauma. Ronin grimly vowed never to let them escape, but the sheer strain of the battle suddenly caught up to him. Racked by agonizing pain, his body refused to cooperate, leaving him momentarily incapacitated. Seizing the opening despite her rage and confusion, Scylla realized victory was impossible. She opted to flee to the sanctuary of her church to report the disaster. As she conjured a getaway portal, she cast a venomous glare at Ronan, promising to uncover his secrets and strip away everything he held dear, vowing specifically to slaughter his family, his companions, and his lover. Frustrated by his body's failure, Ronan recognized her words as a vital clue regarding the dark future he was trying to prevent. Desperate to keep the lead from slipping away, he clawed the air and screamed at her to halt. Suddenly, a chilling, authoritative voice echoed through the area, ordering Scylla to freeze. It was maybe Rose. The mere sound of the newcomer's voice struck absolute terror into Scylla, rooting her to the spot. Ronan watched in astonishment as maybe Rose stepped forward, stating she had inquiries of her own. As she spoke, her overwhelming aura manifested into the terrifying visage of a colossal serpent ready to strike. With a menacing glare, she demanded to know what gave Scylla the audacity to harm her apprentice. Turning briefly to Ronan, maybe Rose mentioned she had been briefed on the situation. Ronan managed a strained smile, praising her impeccable timing and noting he hadn't anticipated her arrival. Brushing off his flattery, she remarked that he clearly had plenty of energy left if he was still talking, before shifting her stern focus back to Scylla. Instantly, the ethereal giant snake coiled tightly around Scylla, plunging her into deep panic. Shaking violently, Scylla recognized the legendary Ophidian aura. She realized the unmatched sword saint herself stood right before her. Terrified and unable to move a muscle, she could not comprehend why such a legendary figure was present at the forge. Maybe Rose clamped a hand over Scylla's mouth, rebuking her for crossing lines that should have remained unthinkable. She emphasized that her greatest fury stemmed from the injuries inflicted upon her disciple. Realizing the gravity of her blunder, Scylla trembled as maybe Rose promised her an experience of true horror. The spectral serpent then opened its maw, inflicting a devastating mental assault that broke Scylla's mind and caused her to lose consciousness. Just before blacking out, Scylla whispered an apology to the star for failing her objective. Once Scylla collapsed, maybe Rose commended Ronan for his grueling efforts, noting that they would tend to the injured before delivering a full report to the Academy's principal. Still resting on the ground, Ronan inquired if Scylla's destination of torment was the notorious Rodel in prison. Maybe Rose confirmed his suspicion, asking how he knew of it. Internal panic gripped Ronan upon hearing her confirmation. He remembered Rodel in from his previous life, where it was dreaded as the Fortress of Screams. The isolated penitentiary floated in the deep ocean, housing high-profile dissidents of the Empire and utilizing ruthless, infallible interrogation techniques. Standing up, Ronan implored maybe Rose to let him participate in Scylla's questioning. Surprised, she dismissed the idea, stating such a grim place was no environment for him. Ronan seized her hand, earnestly pleading for the favor and emphasizing the critical importance of the matter. Touched by his sincerity, maybe Rose fell silent. Meanwhile, the local knights and clergy worked tirelessly to assist the wounded. Maria, Assel, and Sita sat exhausted after exhausting their energy to aid the victims. Assel expressed concern to Maria regarding Ronan's prolonged absence, wondering if disaster had struck. Right on cue, Ronan appeared to greet them. Relieved and astonished, the group listened as Ronan lauded their accomplishments, praising Maria for securing reinforcements and commending Assel and Sita for rescuing over half of the trapped blacksmiths. When he asked if they were unharmed, Maria retorted that he was the last person who should be asking about health. Assel pointed out that Ronan was the one drenched in blood, frantically begging him to sit for medical attention. Ronan dismissed their worries, explaining he had already received basic treatment on his way over, and urged them to rest. His gaze then drifted toward the remains of Edwin and the restrained Scylla, his expression hardening as he murmured that he still had unfinished business. Hours later, Ronan, maybe Rose, and a contingent of soldiers gathered at the precipice of the Greeno Forest Cliff, the designated rendezvous point for the Rodel and transport units. Soon after, a flying griffin pulling an attached airborne carriage arrived. Masked operatives wearing ominous crow visages disembarked, their leader saluting maybe Rose and stating they had answered the Imperial directive to retrieve the subversives. Indicating the prisoners, maybe Rose warned the officer that Edwin possessed an active regenerative ability requiring requiring constant vigilance during questioning. The operative smirked, noting their inquisitors would relish the challenge of a truly resilient subject. As the guards loaded the captives, the leader promised to relay their findings once the process concluded, wishing maybe Rose continued success in protecting the Empire before taking flight. Turning to Ronan, maybe Rose estimated it would take roughly a week for Rodell in to break the prisoners. She promised to notify him the moment they called for her, instructing him to remain alert and prepared to move. Ronan gave his compliance and expressed his gratitude. In the days that followed, the Grand Cappadocia Forge underwent rapid restoration courtesy of generous imperial funding. Ronan returned to his routine at the academy, occupying his time with remedial coursework. A week later, deep within the subterranean chambers of Rodell Inn, an old man used heavy pliers to wrench the teeth from a screaming inmate. Pausing mid-act, the torturer mused aloud that he had become so engrossed in his work that he nearly forgot his scheduled appointments. Removing his mask, the elderly gentleman stepped outside the cell to welcome maybe Rose and Ronan, introducing himself as Karaka, the head interrogator assigned to their case. With a pleasant smile, he offered to guide them to the targets immediately. Maybe Rose agreed, requesting a briefing on his progress along the way. As Karaka led them down the corridor, Ronan whispered to maybe Rose, expressing disbelief that such a gentle-looking elder could be the feared interrogator of Rodell Inn. Laughing softly, maybe Rose noted that everyone shared that exact reaction upon meeting Karaka, warning Ronan never to underestimate him, as he would soon witness why the man was considered a living nightmare. Karaka explained that the prisoners belonged to a clandestine faction known as Nebula Klager. When maybe Rose admitted she had never heard of them and asked if they were akin to the Calabaro Syndicate, Karaka clarified that Nebula Klager was far more perilous due to their total anonymity. He revealed that this group was directly responsible for major recent catastrophes, including the Nolan Granary Inferno and the Eatman Magic Engineering Institute bombing, effectively orchestrating the string of unexplained disasters over the past year. Ronan was stunned by the revelation, troubled by the fact that such a devastating cabal had operated during his past life without his knowledge. He asked Karaka if the captives had uttered anything regarding Starlight or the arrival of the star. Karaka admitted it was the first he had heard of those terms. Ronan explained he had overheard the phrases during the initial skirmish, suggesting they held the key to the cult's ultimate objective. As Ronan spoke, he noticed Karaka's demeanor abruptly shift into something profoundly sinister, sending a chill down his spine. Slipping his mask back on, Karaka apologized for showing them an inadequate display during their initial introduction. He expressed deep embarrassment that his sincerity had not yet resonated with his subjects, stating he needed to put more heart into his work. Upon entering the chamber, Ronan was horrified by the state of the once arrogant cultists who had been reduced to broken wrecks. Karaka gestured to Edwin, calling him an entertaining subject due to the dark magic constantly repairing his flesh. Brandishing a spiked implement, Karaka explained that the secret to breaking Edwin was simply mutilating him faster than his magic could compensate. He drove the tool into Edwin, proudly demonstrating the results of his agonizing amputations. Turning the weapon toward his guests, Karaka looked back at Edwin with a terrifying stare, expressing disappointment that his friend was still withholding information. Grabbing Edwin by the hair, he demanded total honesty. Bursting into tears, a panicked Edwin wept that he had already disclosed everything he knew. Karaka countered by asking about Ronan's mention of the arrival of the star. Edwin hesitated, prompting Karaka to issue a grim ultimatum. Since Scylla lacked regenerative powers, she would not survive another round of torment. Scylla began to convulse with fear, weeping and begging for death. Even with his extensive military background, Ronan found the sheer brutality of the scene shocking. Watching Edwin tremble as a glowing, white-hot iron neared his face, Ronan deduced that the cultist wasn't merely being stubborn. Keeping secrets after total exposure made little sense. He interjected, suggesting to Karaka that Edwin wasn't refusing to speak, but was physically incapable of doing so. Intrigued, maybe Rose listened as Ronan explained that battlefield commanders often placed sealing curses upon intelligence officers to prevent them from leaking secrets to enemies. Recognizing the validity of the theory, Karaka released Edwin and admitted his own embarrassment for overlooking such a fundamental countermeasure. He briefly left the room, returning shortly with a bizarre, glowing entity known as a Kisai, a parasitic creature that sustained itself by consuming curses. Karaka placed the creature directly onto Edwin's skull, where it burrowed beneath the skin and began to radiate a harsh light. Edwin shrieked in agony as the parasite devoured the binding spell, leaving his body venting dark smoke once the curse was lifted. Karaka stepped forward once more, demanding the truth regarding the arrival of the star. Terrified of further mutilation, Edwin finally capitulated. He proclaimed that the star was an immortal, absolute entity destined to deliver the weak denizens of the Empire. He described Nebula Klager as a vanguard torch awaiting the celestial descent from beyond the firmament, aiming to eradicate any obstacle to that glorious day. Scylla screamed at him to stay silent, but Karaka cut across her, demanding a direct description of what exactly was falling from the heavens. With a vacant, dead-eyed stare, Edwin whispered that the children of the stars were descending. Hearing this, a wave of cold fury washed over Ronan as he realized Edwin was referring to none other than the catastrophic Ahuti. Approaching Edwin with a menacing expression, Ronan questioned whether the children of the stars he referred to were known as Ahuti. This revelation deeply startled Edwin, who couldn't comprehend how Ronan possessed knowledge regarding the children of the stars, and he questioned him about it. Before he could press further, Edwin's face suddenly swelled up. Witnessing this bizarre occurrence left Ronan utterly bewildered. Karaka immediately stepped in, placing a hand on Ronan's shoulder to pull him back, while instantly casting a protective spell. Ronan quickly positioned himself behind Karaka, just as a brilliant light burst from Edwin's face, causing his entire body to detonate. Fortunately, Karaka's defensive barrier shielded both himself and Ronan from the explosion. Karaka was astonished by the blast, having never anticipated such a lethal consequence after Edwin's curse had been extracted. He stared in disbelief at the remains, as nothing but scattered flesh was left of Edwin. Ronan inquired if such grisly outcomes were standard during interrogations, to which Karaka responded that incidents of this nature are exceptionally rare and almost never escalate to this point. Karaka explained that Edwin's body had been bound by a two-part curse. The first restriction prevented him from ever disclosing information about the children of the stars to anyone outside their group. Hearing this explanation made Scylla tremble with fear. Karaka continued, stating that the second condition triggered an immediate fatal explosion if any member uttered terms linked to the children of the stars or the star's advent. In a chilling tone, Karaka gripped Ronan's shoulder again and demanded to know what Udi meant. Ronan froze in shock. Recognizing that the term Ronan used was a closely guarded secret within Nebula Klayer, Karaka demanded to know how a regular individual acquired such classified intelligence. Channeling his magic, Karaka menacingly asserted that as an interrogator, it was his duty to uncover every detail of the case, demanding a full explanation. Terrified by Karaka's intimidating demeanor, Ronan claimed he had stumbled upon the word purely by accident. He explained that since he was the first to encounter Edwin and Scylla, he had inadvertently overheard them mentioning it. He admitted he initially dismissed the word as trivial, but realized its true weight during the interrogation. Caught up in the heat of the moment upon recognizing its importance, he had impulsively questioned Edwin. Ronan then removed Karaka's hand from his shoulder, offering an apology for disrupting the investigation, and asked if his explanation sufficed. Although Karaka remained deeply skeptical, finding it highly improbable that Ronan just happened to overhear such critical data, he discerned through the look in Ronan's eyes that he posed no threat to the Empire. Rather than displaying willpower or a sense of duty, Ronan's gaze burned with a massive, deep-seated hatred toward Nebula Klayer as Karaka stood captivated by the sheer intensity of Ronan's resentment. Nabros drew her blade and pressed it against his throat. Angrily, she demanded he halt his foolish interrogation, questioning whether he actually dared to grill her student right in front of her. Panic-stricken, Karaka released Ronan, claiming to the legendary sword saint that he was merely performing a routine double-check for safety's sake. He then politely apologized to Ronan for the trouble, which Ronan brushed off, glad that the misunderstanding was resolved. In truth, Ronan was incredibly relieved by Nabros' timely intervention, as the prospect of a full interrogation by Karaka terrified him. Karaka then lamented the loss of the cursed eye creature that perished alongside Edwin, noting that unlike most magical beasts, cursed eyes are incredibly resilient and difficult to eliminate. Intrigued, Ronan asked if they were truly that powerful. Karaka confirmed this and invited Ronan to inspect it. Looking down at the creature, Karaka noticed it was strangely glowing. He was baffled as to when it could have absorbed a curse, knowing it hadn't gone near Scylla. He then realized the creature had extracted a curse from Ronan himself, recalling that he had briefly touched Ronan to cast his mana barrier. Amazed that the beast managed to absorb a curse in such a short window, Karaka grabbed Ronin's hand, apologized for his previous bluntness, and placed the cursed eye directly onto his palm. To Ronin's bewilderment, the cursed eye immediately began draining the curse from his body. However, the sheer magnitude of the curse within Ronin proved too overwhelming for the creature, causing it to spontaneously detonate. Confused by the sudden self-destruction, Ronin asked why it happened. Flabbergasted by the creature's inability to withstand the burden, Karaka solemnly informed Ronin that he was afflicted by a curse. When a startled Ronin demanded an explanation, Karaka asked if he had ever experienced physical constraints in his daily life, such as an inability to run properly, hold steel objects, or perform tasks that others did effortlessly. This prompted Ronin to realize he had never once experienced the flow of mana within himself, a realization shared by Nabros. Seeing the look on Ronin's face, Karaka knew his hypothesis was correct. He assured Ronin he wouldn't pry further if it was an uncomfortable topic, though he admitted he possessed no remedy for it. With a grim expression, Karaka added that while the caster's identity remained a mystery, the curse itself was saturated with immense malice. Following the conclusion of the inquiry, Karaka escorted Nabros and Ronin to their carriage, promising to keep them updated on Scylla's situation once her own curse was dismantled, though he warned it would take time due to its complexity. Nabros acknowledged this and instructed him to pass along any findings. Noting Ronin's profound silence, Karaka asked if he was overwhelmed. Ronin admitted he was simply startled by the revelation of his curse. Karaka reassured him, pointing out his status as a Philin Academy student. When Ronin questioned how that status helped, Karaka smiled and explained that the academy housed a long-standing scholar, Professor Maya Secret, who was the continent's foremost authority on curse magic.